Welcome to the Trading Sliders Podcast. Here we go, Flash. Episode number 7 of the Trading Sliders Podcast. I mean, we're damn near 2 months into this.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, time does fly. How was your weekend, Flash?
That was good.
Yeah.
Didn't do a whole lot, but that was kind of nice, actually.
Well, yeah, you had a real good weekend. I did a lot.
Well, I cleaned a bunch of leaves. I don't know if I've ever told you how much I hate leaves.
Yeah, I had to clean leaves today. Our driveway was about half flooded. This weekend, I made the trip down to 191 Speedway. We're going to get into that and talk about the World Finals, but it's going to be kind of short and sweet on our end because we said we had a huge guest, and Pat Sullivan, National Sprint Car Hall of Fame member, the former announcer for USAC, former announcer for every racetrack in Indiana, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He's our guest. Great interview, guys. I'm telling you, you want to stick through the whole interview. I know it's a little long. You might have to pause it and come back to it.
Right.
We try to keep this within an hour, but this show is not an hour when you see the time come up. But it is worth it. Trust me, it is worth it. One of the most exciting interviews we've done.
Yeah, it's a really interesting interview, too. I mean, he has a lot of knowledge on all kinds of racing, not just sprint cars. It's a little bit of everything.
Yep. Yeah, Pat Sullivan, he can talk about the Mario Andretti, Michael Schumacher, and Chuck Barnes Jr. All in the same conversation.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's crazy, the vast knowledge of Pat. So, but let's get into what went on this weekend first. The World Finals. We're not going to talk about all 3 races, like I said, because we're going to do it short and sweet. But the World of Outlaw Sprint Car champion, David Gravel, he collected his first championship. And I seen there was some backlash, people saying, he couldn't win it because Brad Sweet wasn't there. But that's just part of it. You race with who you got,
Yeah, that's what you do.
And I seen somebody that did a breakdown of the two that faced when the high limit and the face-to-face against them, and broke down like the way they finished. And I think it was going to be like 15 points one way or the other. It depends on how what point system you was using. Yeah. So if Brad Sweet was there, it was going to be a really close final anyway. So,
right.
But congratulations to David Gravel. And then the World Outlaw late models, Brandon Shepard becomes the first ever 5-time champion for the World Outlaw late models.
Yeah.
Pretty good way for B Shep to go out in the the Longhorn house car. Rumor is he's going back to Rocket, but I just heard today where B Shep's going to take his family car to the Dome. So
right.
I think they got Rockets and Longhorns in the family operation.
Yeah, I think they do. So they said they'd probably be there in a Rocket. So
yeah, it's I'm pretty sure that we're just kind of waiting. Probably, I'd say within a week or so, everybody will know that B Shep is going to be back in the Rocket One, and I think Josh Richards is going to be the crew chief from everything that we've heard. So
right.
There's a lot of conspiracy stuff going on about that. Did B Shep go over to Longhorn to steal their secrets, or or did it just not work out? Because B Shep struggled for a little bit in that Longhorn.
Oh yeah, the first 4 or 5 weeks he was really not very good.
Yeah, I mean it was pretty rough, honestly, and his driving style. Longhorns drive the car straight, and Rocket's more of a twisted up.
Yeah.
And B Shep didn't grow up driving on racetracks where you drive the car straight.
No.
So
everywhere he used to run was all hammered down, throw it in the corner, sideways.
But the big news is, last week we talked about Brandon Overton is going to be the Longhorn house driver this year. But breaking news, well, it's kind of breaking. Anthony Burrows left SSI Motorsports, and first thing everybody said was, "Oh my God, he's going to go back to RTJ." No, he's going to the Longhorn house car. Yeah. I think on the Kenny conversation with Rumbly, I've seen where Rumbly kind of let that out before, before it was actually announced.
Right.
With Rumbly technically being the director of operations there at Longhorn, he said, well, Hudson O'Neal will have whatever he needs to succeed. And then Kenny Walls was like, "Whoa, are you saying Anthony Burrows is leaving?" And he kind of backtracked a little bit. He's like, "Well, I'm just saying, well, it may happen." So, Kevin Rumley's about like me. He just blurted out. We forget you're not supposed to know shit. But one interesting thing, though, championship driver and crew chief have a little dust up at the World Finals. Ricky Thornton Jr. and Smokey Madden, they haven't even gone to the banquet yet, Flash.
Yeah.
It looks like us at the drone.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fighting. I seen the video.
That might be awkward.
Yeah, yeah, they're gonna go up there and collect the check.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens next week because somebody said there might be some extracurricular activity at the racetrack next week in El Sonoya.
Yeah, we might have some drama in the ATL, but I think after a week they'll all be cooled down.
Oh yeah, probably so.
But Ricky Thornton Jr. did kind of have a reason to be upset. Smokey did kind of lean on him a little bit.
Yeah.
But the second time, I think Thornton was just trying to cut his tire off without like running over him. Because he turned into him, but he didn't. He didn't. Like, if he wanted to wreck him in that situation, he could have.
Oh yeah, I think he could have took him all around.
I think Thornton was trying to be a nice guy, but get him back type thing.
Right.
But yeah, RTJ and Smokey getting a little dust up action there. It's always good. It's good for the sport. Seems like I don't think anybody likes RTJ anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, we love him.
Yeah. You got a Thornton shirt on right now.
Yeah, hell, I'm wearing a Ricky Thornton shirt right now. The guy can drive anything.
Yeah, he can drive anything. That's what I like about him.
And for everybody that says Anthony Burrows was the smart guy on the crew, I'm not taking anything away from Anthony Burrows because I know Kevin Rumley said Anthony Burrows is the smartest crew chief out there. So if Kevin Rumley says that, I'll agree with you. But Ricky Thornton Jr., it's not like he didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
Because everywhere he goes, he wins.
Yeah, he's fast.
And with that whole deal, I don't know what Hudson O'Neal is going to do at SSI. I don't know what their plans are. I'm sure that will come out, And
who crew chief's going to be or whatever.
Yeah, here in the near future. So I was going to say maybe it'd be Don O'Neal, but Don O'Neal kind of let the cat out of the bag. He's going to run about 40 races next year. So
I think he's going to run the Masterbuilt house car or tight house. Kind of like a house car.
House-ish car.
Yeah. I might have to do some diving into that and see what's going on there.
Yeah, we're going to put Kurt. He's going to do he's going to be like John Boas in Louisville. He's going to do investigative reporting.
Yeah.
For you guys don't know, Flash used to work at Masterbuilt. He was the one that did all the bodies and bumpers and all the good stuff up there years ago.
That was Brad Irwin anyway. Yeah. We need to get Brad Irwin on here one of these days too, maybe.
Yeah, Brad, if you're listening, we're gonna need some interviews. So
yeah.
But like I said, I went down to 191 this weekend. My wife and I went down there yesterday. Weather was beautiful. Racetrack was hammered down with it had a massive cushion, Flash. It looked like the ditch. It was West Memphis, Arkansas, and Eastern Kentucky.
I've been wanting to make it down there all year, but I never did make it. So, but I'll try to make it down there next year, maybe.
This is the first time I've been there in 15, 16 years. I was there the last time, before it closed down.
Right.
Last time I was there, it was not hammered down.
Yeah.
The cat that's got it now is like, we're going to put some water to it, and you guys are going to hustle around the wall here. But it was a really good late model race. A bunch of cautions. They had 20 super late models, and I don't know how to say this correctly. They had 20 super late models, but if they would have had some B mains, 5 or 6 in the back wouldn't have been in an A main.
Yeah.
But all in all, it was a good race. Just a bunch of cautions. Dalton Cook tried a massive slider. A massive slider on Derek Fisher, and it didn't stick. He looped it, but good thing for Dalton Cook was guy broke down going down the backstretch, so the caution was already out. So he got to keep second place.
Yeah.
Already been fun watching Dalton Cook come from the tail.
Yep.
But there in the last few laps, the race for second between Shannon Thornsberry and Dalton Cook was really, really good. Thornsberry ended up getting by Eastern Kentucky guy, knowing those tracks.
Right.
About 10 laps to go in the 40 lap feature, they started coming off the cushion because the cushion got so far around there. You could roll through the middle and the bottom pretty good, and so they came off the cushion, and it was it wasn't terrible by any means, but it was a lot funner when it was on the cushion for the first 30 laps. But shout out to Derek Fisher. He took home the $5,000 to win Southern All Stars race. Shannon Thornsberry was second, and Cook was third. And the modified feature, Jeremy Rayburn out of Ohio picked up the win. He ripped the top for about 3 laps and then decided he's just going to come on down and save his equipment. But he kind of won convincingly. So that was my weekend in a nutshell. Worked on a race car all weekend. Hell, when you got here earlier, I was still working on a race car. One thing about that, guys, if you got a street stock car and you want a body on it, I'm more than happy to do it. But let's use a street stock nose. Okay, let's not use a wide late model nose. Don't bring a wide late model nose for me to put on, because they're about 12 inches too wide, and you got to do a little bit of work to them.
Yeah.
That's just a side note.
Yeah.
But with Pat Sullivan coming on, we're going to talk about the USAC West Coast Swing, and November 15th and 16th. So this is going to come out Monday, which is the 12th or something.
I think it's let's see.
11th.
I'll tell you here in just a second. Yeah, it's going to be the 11th.
Yeah. So the show will be out on the 11th. That weekend, I think it's Friday and Saturday. The Cars and Stars of the USAC are going to be at Placerville. Hangtown 100. It's going to go down in Hangtown.
Yeah.
There's a slew of cars that are going out for this. Is the only 100-lap midget race on the schedule every year since the Hut 100, quit a few years ago. And I'm talking like Corey Day, Shane Golubic. There's so many, like wing sprint, Tanner Thorson, all the guys that runs wing sprint cars. They're going to go out there.
Yeah.
I've seen where Kel Coons is going out there. I think Coons is going out for the second part of the week, though, the Merced and Bakersfield and Ventura stuff. But there's a ton of cars going out there. So, guys, check it out on Flow. I mean, because we're not, obviously, unless you're listening to us in the California area, it's not like we're going to be able to make a road trip.
Right.
But everything will be on Flow. All USAC races. The number one question for USAC, is it on Flow? And yes, it is. But you got Placerville, and then the following week, you got Tulare, Thunderbolt, Merced, and Bakersfield, and then it ends up at the Turkey Night Grand Prix at Ventura. And Jack Slash did this real big video. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't want to keep this too long, but
yeah.
So Jack Slash last week, he's walking around Ventura Raceway, and he's saying, "This is where the track needs to be. This is where you guys got it. Bring Ventura back." It looks like a political ad.
Yeah.
Like, bring Ventura back. He's down there. He's marking it. He's moving cones. Cut the berm into here. He's sitting in it was so funny. Dropping, he's about like me, dropping F-bombs. He said, "Last time I was here, I ripped my armband off." And I said, "You're never getting money from me again. But I'm going to ride by every day and see if you're working on the track. And if the track's better, I'll be here." But shout out to Jack Slash. We miss Jack Slash in Indiana.
Yeah.
He's out there in California now doing God's work. That's what I told him.
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, you're out there doing God's work." He said, how Jack Slash is. "Well, somebody's got to do it. I mean, damn." He's all excited. But Jack Slash is out there giving track prep for the guys at Ventura. Let's make it wide. He's like, cut a berm in around the wall and have them run the fence. He's like, they're running a 5-mile racetrack, and I mean, damn it, they're 20 feet off the wall. It was funny though. You have to go back and check it out. I think it was on his Instagram.
Yeah.
Anybody that doesn't follow Jack Slash, his Twitter account's pretty good, but check out his Instagram. It's Jack Slash TV, because he has story times with Uncle Jack, and it's funny. I mean, it's hilarious. One of the best guys in the business to bring you stories about sprint car racing. And speaking of stories about sprint car racing, right now we're going to take you into this week's guest. Like I said, Pat Sullivan. And guys, trust me, you want to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's time for the Trading Sliders Deep Dives, presented by Kentucky Clutch and Performance. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are on Deep Dives on the Trading Slider podcast. This week, Kurt, we have a huge guest this week. Not huge in stature, but a huge guest. Pat Sullivan. He's in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. Many-time award-winning author, sprint car enthusiast, and just all-around good guy for the sport. Pat, thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
I don't know exactly how we bounce around a lot. So when we get on this, we may be talking about Bloomington Speedway and then go talk about F1 and then
I can do that.
Okay, so like we don't really follow a criteria.
I worked in F1 too. So.
Yeah. So.
You see, we got about 4 things wrote down on the paper. So
yeah, we just bounce around. Back in the mid '90s, I was a huge sprint car fan because of ESPN Thunder. I grew up in the pavement world, and I'm watching TV and they said it's Indiana Sprint Week and it's going to Bloomington Speedway, and I was like, I gotta go to Bloomington Speedway. So I go to Bloomington Speedway, and there's ungodly amount of cars, but there's this voice on the microphone, and real knowledgeable. And I did an interview a few weeks ago with Michael Despain. He was a late model guy, and you are up there like with me because you were the first person I associated with a sprint car voice.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. So, but the funny story is, so I go to Bloomington and I have a great time. I'm in love with sprint cars. Well, like that following Wednesday, I go to a Neymar's midget race at the Indianapolis Speedrome, and they're running the UMRA TQ midgets. And then there's the voice again. I'm like, that's the same guy that was at the Speedrome. I mean, at Bloomington. And this is, years ago, so we haven't talked or nothing. But, I talked to you that night, and he was like, yeah, I do this. And then at this time, I think you were working at Raceway Park. And then, I don't know if you was at Pumpkinville yet, but, just associated my love of sprint car racing, it evolves around you and Bloomington Speedway. Wow. So, I'm just going to say this is an honor. And, I've heard the stories before, but a lot of people haven't. How did you get the job at Bloomington? Because the story I heard, it was pretty funny. You kind of just showed up, right?
Well, actually, I had began my career working at I-44 Speedway in Lebanon, Missouri, at Bolivar. At the time, it was called Speedway USA in Missouri. And that happened because I had a new local racing paper had started up, and I was a faculty member at what was then Southwest Missouri State, now Missouri State University. So I approached him and said, hey, I like racing. I'm new down here. I'd moved from Kansas. I went to the University of Kansas, and I said, I'll try to write some stories for you. And they said, great. So I did. And Bill Don Willard, who was the owner of these two racetracks, liked them. And one day out of the blue, he called me and asked me if I could announce races. I said, I don't have any idea, but I'm sort of willing to give it a try. And it started there. I started there. The transition to Indiana was the most interesting one. You're right. When I first moved to Indiana, I announced to Bloomington, and I announced for the TQs. The Bloomington, I got sight unseen. I literally wrote letters. The Indianapolis Speedrome actually tried to hire me. They wanted me to work 2 nights a week, including their stock car program. Jonathan Stiles on the job. But Bloomington hired me sight unseen. Now, the TQ job I got, believe it or not, through Tony Stewart.
Okay.
And how that came about was Tony Stewart won his very first sprint car race, USAC sprint car race at I-44 Speedway. Wins it, beautiful race. He passes the great Robbie Stanley. On the last lap, he goes to win. It's really exciting. He's in Steve Chrisman's car from Columbus, Indiana. And I'm in Victory Lane. I'm going to do the interview, and he looks at me and says, man, I can't get out of the car. And I said, why? And he goes, well, I peed my pants on the parade lap. And I said, Tony, you're yards away from the grandstands. You got a dark uniform.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to see this. Okay, so that's where the relationship with Tony starts. The next time they came, later that year, I went down to the pits and said, hey, Tony, I got you covered. Got an extra pair of pants in the car if you need them. and of course, you all know Tony. Tony put together about 9 of the greatest formed together swear words of all time that ended with me being a jerk. And that's where our relationship started. So I'm at the Chili Bowl. I know I'm going to take a job at Indiana University. I want to keep announcing. And he got the name the Rushville Rocket because he lived with a guy named Larry Martz, who lived in Rushville, Indiana. Tony was from Columbus. And so I saw Tony, and I told him I was moving to Indiana and I'd like to keep announcing. And he said, hey, hold on. And he gets Larry Martz. And Larry Martz says, yeah, you want to announce TQ races? And I said, sure, I want to do anything. And he gave me a woman named Sandy Lowe. Sandy Lowe, interestingly enough, her dad owned the car that won the very first Chili Bowl with Rich Vogler. So
everything just works together.
Comes together.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
And so I go, the very first race I'm going to announce, I still live in Missouri, about the first half of the year. I'm driving back and forth. First race I announced in Rushville, Indiana, I go to this rodeo grounds, it looks like, and I'm looking around thinking, now exactly what did I get myself into?
Well, that's funny that you said that, because the reason why I ever went to Rushville the first time was because you were talking about the 4th of July race, and you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. It's at the little fairgrounds.
Yeah.
And I pulled in, I thought, what? in the hell is this?
Yeah,
Correct.
I went with you. That
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then everybody starts backing up in those pickup trucks, and that rodeo ground gets sort of turned into a racetrack. And then I realized that was a series that had deep, deep tradition.
Yeah.
The club itself dated back to '61, but TQ Racing gone back for that. So that's how I got started at those two places and where it sort of took off for me in Indiana.
Well, that's what I'm saying because, like, you know, I remember you announced at the 16th Street Speedway, correct?
I did.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because I remember right when they put that together, you know, I was just now again, I was following every midget, every sprint car race. And I remember I was going to the 16th Street Speedway and, you know, I try to make Bloomington as much as I could on Fridays, but, you know, where I lived, it was 2.5 hours. So,
Sure.
you know, I started traveling a lot and I was just like, I walk in 16th Street Speedway and it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about. It's the baseball stadium still. And I'm like, how's there a racetrack here? And then it comes the voice again. And, you know, it's Pat Sullivan. And he's like, you know, I'm welcome. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this man announces every track in the state.
It was pretty busy at that time. And that was interesting because the guy who ran that track, I mean, Tony George was involved, and that's obviously Ed Carpenter's going to be moving into midgets from the quarter midgets. And so that probably spurred Tony's interest in creating turning this into a racetrack. But the general manager was a guy named Dave Cassidy. Dave Cassidy was Tony George's godfather. And he had been involved in racing for a long time. He was, again, obviously, he was Tony George's godfather and stooge for Dwayne Carter. I mean, great history. And the funny thing happened is he didn't really know Brad Dickinson and I. Who he did know was Bill Danella. And Bill Danella had been a USAC voice for a long time. Great voice. He was a PA guy for the Pacers. And he wasn't sure what he was going to do. Well, that lasted 1 week. I mean, 1 week Brad and I had the job. And part of the reason was, and Bill would have later admitted this, was he'd been out of touch. He hadn't been around. But the interesting thing about that whole experience was I went to talk with Dave Cassidy. And Dave Cassidy took out these photos. And he'd say, "Who's that?" And I went, "Well, that's Art Cross. He was the first 500 official rookie of the year." He goes, "That's correct." "Who's that?" "Well, that's Elmer George." "Who's that?" "Well, that's Pat O'Connor." And for Dave Cassidy, that was really important. It was like, well, this guy knows racing.
Right.
So that was great. And that racetrack was really, really a lot of fun.
Well, that's I'm kind of going to segue into this, you know, because every kid's dream that grows up in Indiana is make it to the big track. And you made it to the big track. You know, you didn't grow up in Indiana, but you being an open wheel guy, you know, you're an Indiana guy. As much as you want to claim Missouri, Iowa, all those other places, you're an Indiana guy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, every kid's dream is to make it. And, you know, the last kid, so to speak, to do it was Brian Clausen. And, you know, I know you worked on the Chasing 200 documentary.
Right.
And, you know, with the track being built now for the BC 39, and you know, I think it's great because Indiana kids still have a shot now to go race at the racetrack.
Right.
This year they had their first sprint car event there. Do you think it's something that they're going to grow and just let, you know, kids that run modifieds or micro sprints, or is it just always going to be a one-off to keep it special for the BC 39?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the absolute intent of running that sprint car race was to see the feasibility. We had done the same thing at 16th Street Speedway, by the way, and everybody concurred that it was too tight. So that wasn't going to happen. But I don't think there was any question that Doug Bowles would like there to be an Indiana Sprint Week date at the Speedway.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about that.
The Trading Sliders wants it to be an Indiana Sprint Week date there too.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, you had a little bit of a difference of opinion about whether or not that was going to work or not. I happened to announce the first sprint car race they had at Action Track USA out in Pennsylvania.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this: we went into that. That was the last day of of Eastern Storm.
Is that the one Cal Cummins won?
It's the one that Cal Cummins won.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the only one who was excited about being there were me and Chet Christner. I mean, for some reason, we were both good with it. First of all, it's a neat setting. It's just an incredible setting. I just love that place. And we had like that one yellow early on, and then it was green to checkered, and it was spectacular. And Kyle Cummins was spectacular. So I think very much Doug would like that, and based on my opinion, I think it is feasible. Now, might you want to do something a little bit different with the format? Maybe. Maybe you want to start fewer. I don't know. But I think Doug would like it to be more active than it is.
Well, and this is the reason why I say that, because like Bloomington Speedway is listed a quarter mile, but for everybody that's raced Bloomington Speedway, it's more of a fifth mile.
Yeah.
I mean, they're about the same size.
Right.
It's just Bloomington don't have any walls, so it looks bigger.
Correct.
But over in Illinois, they run. I mean, everybody goes to Macon, they love it.
Right.
Let's get behind something that's centrally located in the heart of USAC country. I don't know why there's criticism.
Well, it's interesting because I could give you a slight bit of inside baseball and a little bit of this. So, I got wind early on that this thing was going to be a possibility, that we were going to. In fact, they asked me to come over and announce the little dirt oval they scratched at a practice session. I think I had to work, but I think Richie Murray ended up actually doing it. So I'm in a coffee shop in downtown Indianapolis, and I see a 500 pace car pull in, and it's Doug Bowles. So Doug Bowles comes out. He's got his ties flapping, his suit jacket's flapping, and he looks at. I mean, guys, he did not miss a beat. He walked in the front door. He looked right at me. He goes, "Pat, I think we're going to get it done." And I knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And he had to push it through. I mean, he really had to push some resistance. Then, the next step in that process is when we kept the walls up.
Yes.
So when we kept the walls up, he had to convince Mr. Penske that this was worthy of an event. Now, Roger's favorite race driver growing up was a midget racer.
Yeah.
But he had to convince Roger that it was good to have this event. And I think he's obviously got that done. And now I think the next thing he's got on the agenda is let's use it more than once.
Well, that's that's what I'm saying. Like going forwards, because you mentioned Action Track USA, they run weekly micros. Millbridge runs weekly micros.
Correct.
We're in the heart of non-wing country. I'm not saying weekly, but let's run a monthly micro show there on Wednesday nights and give these kids a place to race.
Well, wouldn't that be exciting for them? That's an idea I had not considered.
Yeah.
I know at times Joe Spiker has talked about building a micro track at Terre Haute. Obviously, they run it at US 24 and Logan Sport and up in Peru. But it would certainly be a reasonable idea.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
Those kids, that'd be something for them to talk about too. So,
I mean, because years ago, you had an opportunity to run the big track. Now you don't. I mean, now it's almost unfeasible, unthinkable. I mean, there's plenty of talent out there, but I mean, let's get this ball rolling. Because I've always said that, like, you turn on Dirt Vision or Flow, and they've got micros racing all throughout the week it's phenomenal. And we're in, the heart of non-wing country. How come we can't have something?
And it becomes important. And it becomes important because, USAC years ago did sanction TQ racing out in the West Coast. They had a TQ series out there. Now, the TQ, even the TQs we run now, the extension of the UMRA, the All-Stars, is a different, it's almost a one-off kind of car.
Yeah.
Not like a micro. I actually asked Tony at one point when the All-Star TQ Midgets was his series, which it's not anymore.
Right.
I actually candidly said to him one time, Tony, you ever have any thoughts about moving this to micros? And I love the TQs. But for USAC, to me, there is a need for a closer bridge with those micro guys because, you're wearing a Dason Pursley shirt, right?
Yes, sir.
He's a talented young kid. We know where he came from. We know where a lot of these kids came from. And we need to keep that pipeline of young talent coming into USAC. I love Justin Grant. I love Robert Ballou. I love CJ Leary. I love Kevin Thomas Jr. But those guys are not in the spring of their career.
No, they're not going to be here forever.
And they may not know that, but I know that.
Yes.
I actually called Justin Grant once. Justin slept on my couch when he was a kid before he ever made it. And so I feel a little fatherly to him. I called him one day and said, Justin, I just need you to tell me that you're saving some money. because you were not going to win races forever.
Right.
And he says, Pat, I've got really short arms and really long pockets.
That's funny.
And so he made me feel good. But we need that new talent to come up.
Well, you are Mr. USAC, in my opinion. And anybody else that says different, we can negotiate that. We can talk about that. But, the USAC sprint car racing to me is the most exciting racing there is. And, each year we lose a guy to the wings. We lose a guy. And I love wing racing. I love all racing. But I don't know what the real answer is because, I know wing cars are a little safer, so to speak. But, it's not, it can't just be the wings pay that much more money. There's got to be a reason why USAC. USAC had the first TV deal. It should be the granddaddy of them all.
Right.
And, it's kind of taking a step back. And, I hate that as a fan. I know you hate that. But, what's the answer?
I don't know what the answer is. The problem is that when people look at the money, they forget about the expenses. It's incredibly more expensive to win a ring sprint car. And certainly if you want to do high limit of the World of Outlaws, the expenses in travel are astronomical. So, I was a little surprised by the move by Brady Bacon because Brady Bacon was a National Merit Scholar. His valedictorian of his high school, like Cody Swanson. He's a smart guy. He's a smart businessman. And we've talked about this, about, what's the best way for him to run professionally. And it's been primarily to do USAC. He figured that out. Now, does he have another sort of incentive to make the move? Yes, probably. Yeah. He does. But, Chris Wyndham didn't make more money running the wing cars than he was non-wing.
Yeah.
Kevin Thomas tried, and he came back. And Kevin Thomas won wing races.
Yeah.
I saw Kevin Thomas run a great race with the Maverick Series at Terre Haute. Kevin Thomas can run wing cars. Justin Grant can run wing cars. The lure is, when you look at those eye-popping dollars that they're racing for, and you're realizing if you win one of those, you just made bank.
Yeah, well, you win one, you win 5 USAC features.
You've done that, and plus, they're seen as edgy. Well, they're seen as sort of.
It's the new thing.
It's the thing. It's comes and goes. But I do want to maintain young talent. For example, how good is Briggs Danner going to be? Yeah. Briggs Danner is an outstanding racer.
Yes.
In everything he runs.
Well, and here's what's crazy about Briggs Danner is he's doing the non-wing thing in the heart of wing country.
Oh, yeah.
He's right there in central Pennsylvania, and USAC's East Coast deal, has played a big role in that.
But I want to keep him.
Yes.
That's, I want to keep Briggs Danner. I want to keep and get younger guys involved and being successful to keep it vibrant. Because, first of all, you guys both said it. I'm a race fan. Period. End of story. Right. I like racing. Yeah. I like all kinds of racing. Do I think non-wing sprint cars are more? I do. I think they level out the competition some. But when we go to Eastern Storm, you don't think I'm sitting there with my mouth open watching cars go down that front straightaway at Williams Grove or Port Royal, or that I don't enjoy watching them at Eldora? I do.
Yeah. Well, that's me. I love all racing. I'm even the type guy that I can, people, the Hornets I don't care. Because those guys are working just as hard.
That's exactly right.
They work just as hard. They pay the same amount. They pay the same amount of money to get in. And honestly, they're not jaded.
Bobby, I can tell you this right now. I can tell you this categorically, honest to God, I'm not lying. If you look objectively at the racing, over the last 3 years, the best racing at Lincoln Park Speedway is the Bombers.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're the best. They're closer. They're together. They're banging around. Etc. And they're racing before, 100 diehards the last feature of the night.
Yeah.
But you made the point. And I know you understand this as well. You're right. Those guys go to work and they come in, and women, they go to work and they work on the race cars and they care about their craft and they take it seriously. And we need to take it seriously. I get really tired of people, sort of bashing the so-called support classes.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to get at, because I guess it's been about a month now. I announced for a series, and we go to Rock Castle Speedway, and we have a $5,000 to win modified race, and we ran first because it was the touring series in town, and the guy at the track, he had an announcer, and they're running behind, and he asked me, he said, "Hey, when you go down and do the interview, do you care to stay down there and do all of our feature lane victories?" And I said, "No, man, I don't care. I'm here anyways. It doesn't matter, So, we get down there, and, after the mods, and, there comes the street stocks, and the guy gets out, and his wife's, smiling, and they're taking a picture. But it was the last race of the night, and it was the Hornets. And this guy comes out, and he's probably mid-50s,
Right.
So he's doing this because he loves it. He doesn't have a goal to go anywhere else. And he gets out, and he wins, and, he just goes, "Man, that's awesome." And it's like, it stopped me in my tracks. And so I turned to Mike and I said, "So, you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah," he said, "I've been coming here for 15 years trying to get a feature win, and I finally got one."
Yep.
And I was just like, and these people are walking, they're walking out. And of course, it's late. I mean, I get it. I've been the guy that's had a 3-hour drive home that I need to leave. But, I'm like, whoa. Hey, stop. Come back. We're going to have a really good interview here. So I interviewed him for like 15 minutes on the front stretch, So, like,
Yeah, we had that at Bloomington this year. We had a guy who told me, "I grew up watching races on that hillside, and all I dreamed about was winning a feature at Bloomington Speedway."
Yeah.
For him, it was the crowning moment at that point in his career,
Yes.
and in some sense, his life.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's, and like I said, Bloomington Speedway is 100 and, how many years?
102.
102. Like when I walk in Bloomington Speedway, is there nicer facilities in the country? Yeah, there is. I mean, there's nicer facilities in the state. But when you walk up that hill and you see that beautiful green grass and that red clay, I tell people all the time, I've been to 237 racetracks. It's in my top 5 just because the beauty alone, and that's before it gets a 2-foot monster cushion.
No, I said this in the Historical Society in Bloomington did a thing on the 100th anniversary, and I said, I had, again, you heard the story, I had written a letter to Mike Miles, who was my boss for a long time, and told him I wanted to continue announcing when I moved to Indiana. So I had a meeting in the fall. I had come up for a meeting at IU. It was early fall or late summer, but I think it was fall. And anyway, he asked me to come down and meet him at Bloomington Speedway. And I drove up that hill and crested it, and I looked down in that bowl in that red clay, and I saw those trees, and it just about took my breath away. And the funny thing is, it still does. In terms of a setting, it is captivating to me. And I don't know. I'm an old guy who likes history, right? Yeah. Sometimes I go to facilities and they're too nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And no, I get that 100%. And then sometimes you go to facilities, they're nowhere near nice enough either.
Yeah.
But
I've been there too.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because my wife, like every time I go to Bloomington, I'll park at the bottom of the hill, and she's like, "I mean, for one time, can we park at the top?" And I was like, "No," because I love when I walk up to the top of that hill, I look over, I'm like, and this is one of the most beautiful racetracks in the country. And, it's just, I love Bloomington Speedway. I wish I would love to live in central Indiana so I can make sure I never miss Bloomington. Back in 01 and 02, when I quit racing, I went to Bloomington Speedway. I didn't miss a race for about 4 years at Bloomington Speedway because I was building houses in and I was working for myself, and I could get off whenever I wanted to on a Friday.
Right.
So Bloomington Speedway, like, I love all the tracks in Indiana and Illinois. I mean, but Bloomington Speedway to me is just one of those places that the food is always good, and you would think really as a fan's point, you sit on hard concrete. You got to walk a mile up a hill to go to the bathroom. Everything's uphill. But, man, it's just one of those places that you just can't. Right. You cannot go wrong at Bloomington Speedway.
I have a distinct memory of the last race of the year, about maybe 3 years ago was the last race of the year. And I had parked on the bottom parking lot. And so I'm walking down, and you'll know this, there's a great big tree that has a Smokey the Bear sign on it.
Oh, yeah.
That has been there. And
I
I
know the
remember, and the leaves are rustling, and I'm looking up there and I'm thinking, how many races has this old tree seen? And then I thought, this tree's going to be here after I'm gone. Yeah. And if we continue the racetrack, that's just something. It just tells you how timeless it is.
Yes, that's
and I love it.
And I know you work at at Lincoln Park there in Putmanville, and it's another beautiful. I mean, as you roll into Putmanville, especially the pit, like for a grass pit area. Lincoln Park may have the nicest grass pit area you'd ever have at any racetrack in the country.
It's set up well. That's a racetrack, and it's really good.
And you have the push-off lane, and but just something about Bloomington. Right. So I know you work on a lot of the legends of racing documentaries and the Brian Clausen Chasing 200. Is there one that sets out more than others, or do you just, because I know you love racing history, and we walk in your house, your beautiful house, you got the cars right there on the left. Right. First thing I noticed, I'm thinking, that looks just like my gaming room / office /
that's upstairs. Yeah.
So I've got stuff sitting everywhere, and I've got totes and totes and totes.
That's another room.
Okay, yeah, of racing magazines, and we're going to talk about you writing for Sprint Minute, but it had to mean a lot to you to work on the Chasing 200 documentary.
It did, because it did on a couple of levels. I mean, I did a story on Brian when he was about 16. I went over to his house and talked with Tim and Di and Taylor and we had heard about Brian Clausen, right? Brian Clausen was the next. We all got tired of the next Jeff Gordon phenomenon. And we certainly, and Tim, I think, leaned on us to reduce the age of the competition. And then, Brian raced a lot of Bloomington. And I've told this story multiple times, but, I mean, he couldn't beat Kevin Briscoe.
Well, there's not many people that could beat Kevin Briscoe at Bloomington.
Yeah.
Kevin would just snooker him at the last minute, and you just had the sense that the minute that he broke through that dam, that it was going to be something. But then the other thing you began hearing were the older competitors. The older competitors were saying, this kid's the real deal. This kid's got it.
Yeah.
He knows how to handle himself. He knew how to handle himself with the public. And so I'll tell you, a moment that was very poignant for me is that when he qualified for his first 500 at that time, because of my role at the Speedway, I was on the grid essentially till the cars rolled. So I'm working for the Speedway. I'm on the grid, and I go all the way. He's starting pretty back, and I'm going all the way.
I think it was 27th.
I go all the way to the back to find him and to look him in the eye and shake his hand and shake Tim's hand. And I was about to cry. I mean, I can cry now. Yeah. I mean, I was so emotional that he was there.
Yeah.
And I also thought about the gravity of it. I mean, people can sort of, I don't know. Sometimes I think people sort of don't understand the Speedway maybe the way I do. The Speedway is no dog and pony show.
No.
And you can have a bad outcome really quick. And so that he was there and to do that. But yeah, because I watched that whole thing. And then when I saw it, we did a premiere of that at the Can-Can Theater in Indianapolis. I was sort of the host to that. And Kyle Larson came and Sunshine came. The family's there. Cody Swanson came. So that's the first time I saw it.
Okay, yeah.
And my wife and daughter came. My son lives in Colorado, but there were moments when I had a hard time holding on. And probably when Kurt Spridgen lost it. I mean, I guess Kurt Spridgen's, he doesn't display a lot of emotion like that. And when he...
Now, especially like if you've ever been to any of his driver's meeting, it's monotone.
I mean, when he started to lose it, and I knew he'd lost his dad, and when Rizzy lost it, then I remember my wife said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay, but this is tough."
Yeah.
Because I've used this phrase a couple of times. I use it a lot when we talk about Cody Swanson. I mean, I knew at one point I was in the presence of greatness. I mean, you know, I have a phrase I use a lot. I used it pretty recently, but history is what happens right in front of you. I mean,
yes,
Yeah.
history's happening right now,
Yeah.
and I would all of a sudden I went, man, this kid, there's no upper limit to what he can do, and so I mean, Rusty Kuntz, Keith's brother, to me the you know I've done a couple stories on Rusty. I did one fairly recently, and he basically admitted that when Brian got killed, it knocked him off his moorings, and that he never has quite been the same. And he looked at me and said, Pat, Superman's not supposed to die.
yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's true.
Well, so, you know, when that happened, you know, I don't want to dwell on it, but it is history, and you know, when that happened, and the whole movement to, you know, the driven to save lives and everything, and man, that's just. It's almost a storybook ending for the worst possible situation, you know.
Well, it is, and I can tell you, just even a little more inside stuff. So, I got a call. I wasn't there at Belleville. It's a track I love. I wasn't there, and I got a call, and I was told, you know, this is going to be bad. You know, it's bad. He's not going to make it. And actually, Levi Jones sort of asked me to run a little interference because there was some misinformation on the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
So I started writing some private messages to people and just said stop.
Yeah.
And then people want to argue with me. They go, don't argue with me. I know what I'm talking about. I need you to stop. And so I know the whole deal.
Right.
And I go walk into a gym the next morning, and there's a local broadcast, and it made the official announcement, and I just fell apart.
Yeah.
And it was difficult. But then I got to meet for the first time, you know, the guy who has his heart.
Yes.
At Belleville. And, you know, it's funny. I wrote this story. I wrote this recently on Twitter. I probably don't, most people will be shocked to hear this, but I've been a fan of the Grateful Dead since I was 16 years old. It's my favorite rock and roll band.
Right.
To this day. Phil Lesh of the Grateful Dead died a couple days ago. Right, 84 years old, bass player from the beginning. Well, guess what? He got a liver transplant 25 years ago. He was gonna die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got a transplant. He lived for 25 more years, a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
And so I said in my post, and that's why the work of Driven to Save Lives has been so important.
Yeah.
And it's why he went beyond just a great race driver that we lost. And so in that regard, I mean, I had friends from South Dakota come in for the Indianapolis 500. Guess what they wanted to do? They wanted to go out to the gravesite.
Yeah.
They wanted to pay respects. So it's on that. You know what?
Yeah.
He sort of lives on.
Yeah, that's you know, that's what, you know, when they were talking about building the racetrack, and you know, they're doing the BC 39 at the Speedway, and you know, that was the first thing I thought. I was like, man, that's just like the coolest. You know, that's the best way you can pay tribute to anybody.
Yeah, especially him. You know,
they grew up, you know, 30 minutes down the road. I mean, you know, that, and that's the reason why, you know, like circle back, like I want stuff to go on at the racetrack there, you know, because there's kids all over. I mean, there's the March kid that's starting to run midgets now, and you know, Ryland Gray. There's a bunch of young kids that, you know, it's hard for me to fathom, but like they know who Brian Clausen is, but they don't really know who Brian. They know through the stories, you know, and like to me, I can't picture them. Like, you know, that's the same way what you're talking about. You know, the competitors saying, you know, Brian Clausen, he has it when he's young. When Kyle Larson moved to Indiana from California, I remember me and Kurt went to the USAC midget race at Lincoln Park.
Yep.
And Clausen and Larson, they were back and forth. And when the race is over, you know, Clausen did his interview and said, that kid's going to be special. And, you know, we were walking across the track, and I said, you always got to say everybody's going to be special. He goes, no, he's damn good.
No.
Yeah.
It was just funny, though, because
he said he's going to be the next superstar, is what he said.
I had seen him at Indianapolis Raceway Park, his first race on the pavement. He was quick time, and he finished second. Okay, so I'd seen him. But he won his first USAC major race in Bloomington. The picture of me interviewing him is upstairs in my office. And I'm interviewing him, and Keith Coons is leaning against the Armco at the back, and he gives me the high sign, like, come over here afterwards.
Yeah.
So I did the interview, and I came over, and he says, I'm just telling you, that kid is badass.
Yeah.
And
well, that's what I said. I told Kurt, he was young. I think it was his first year here, and he was running a non-wing sprint car, the Rico Avery family car at Kokomo. And I told Flash, I said, Flash, you're not going to believe this. He's like, what? I was like, I just seen a kid tonight use the wall to make a pass. And I'm like, not he got into the wall and made the pass. He started running in turn 4. Like anybody that's raced Kokomo, turn 4 sweeps out. He started running up on the wall, and he passed Darling going in, and I'm like, he just ripped the wall to get around Dave Darling at Kokomo. Yeah. Like, you have to see this kid.
Well, let's back it up, because I can tell you a similar story. It was the first time that Jeff Gordon went to the Belleville Midget Nationals in Kansas, in Belleville, which was even more banked than it is now. It was unbelievable. And the feature event on Saturday night, I'll never forget this, probably as long as I lived. Jeff Gordon went down and rammed the Armco with his rear tire and never lifted and passed 3 cars. Yeah. And then when it was all said and done, he had lapped everybody but Steve Knepper, who had won the Belleville Midget Nationals. He was smart enough to say, I'll just follow him.
Yeah, I'll just race.
Steve Knepper thought he'd won the race.
Yeah.
He had no idea, what had really happened. But those drivers who have that it factor, that 1%er, you know it when you see it, for the most part. And we're talking about guys that had it.
Yeah, well, it's funny you said, Kevin Briscoe. I'm pretty sure you're the one who gave him the nickname Risky Brisky, wasn't you?
I don't think I did, but I...
Okay, well, you take credit for it. I mean, you
I can't remember. Well, he had a driving school.
Yeah.
I think he called it Risky Brisky.
Okay,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
So, Kevin Briscoe was, phenomenal. Believe me, he'd keep the car straight on the bottom. And everybody, especially when it slicked off a little bit, everybody's all sideways, and he's keeping it straight. But, one thing that, I always look back and say, man, what if on this guy? John Stanbro.
Right.
Like, has there ever been a better gasser from the state of Indiana than John Stanbro? Because if there's an old saying, just throw him over your shoulder. I think he originated that. Like, John Stanbro would put his car anywhere and everywhere.
And did so with that reserved personality that he has. John always gives me a hard time about teasing him about that. But the thing about John was, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but he ran the USAC stock car series. I mean, he ran like a Jeffersonville on the pavement.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very early in his career. Moved the sprint cars. He had a family car number 81. And he got a break with the Law Brothers, was one of the big breaks he got in that 77. And he was never afraid. And never really out of control. I mean, he could stay on the gas. I mean, he was about as good a gasser as you could get.
That's what I said. I tell everybody, because I see Braden Fox, and every time I see it 53 roll over the hill, I'm like, oh my God. Just one time I like to see Stanbro back in the car.
Yeah.
Because I think he was one of those guys that it was right there in the area where the USAC guys weren't really getting the opportunities. And I think he could have made a splash, especially because I didn't know he ran, pavement to begin with. So, that really kind of, puts a damper on it, because, I think Stanbro is one of the guys that was a major what if from
Well,
Indiana.
the funny thing was, in that, to be honest with you, I'd have to go back and fact check myself with Kevin Miller, the president of USAC, and Kurt Spridgen was involved. But I honestly believe that it's much more complicated than I'm making it. Bear with me. It's much more complicated than I'm making it. But in part, when there was a decision about whether or not to keep pavement in the sprint car series, first of all, guys were building 2 different race cars, right?
Yes.
Right.
So the costs were going up, and that is a problem. And the car counts weren't going to be the same on the dirt and the pavement. But John Stanbro was case number 1 of, guess what? If this was a dirt-only series, this guy could be the champion.
That's 100% fact.
And he could have been a couple of time champion, and he couldn't get that because he didn't have a pavement right at that particular time.
Well, he just didn't have the opportunity. I mean, that's.
I was really, really, really pleased that he was inducted in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame because I was afraid that the lack of titles was going to get in the way.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is he had been clearly the number one traditional sprint car driver in America, as noted by the poll awards. And the win totals were there, and I was really pleased. I was a little afraid that he would be overlooked, but he shouldn't have been.
Yeah. And I'm glad he wasn't, because like I said, I was a major like John Stambro guy.
Me too.
Just because when you watch him, like he had car control on the edge of insanity. Like you just wouldn't like as a guy, I grew up and I raced I never ran any sprint cars or anything. I ran modifieds and street stocks, and it's hard to do, especially not like Bloomington, but like when you got to places that had like Gas City, for instance. It's so dark there. It was so dark at Gas City on the top side of the racetrack. And Stambro was just kind of like he was racing slot cars, where everybody else was, out there trying. So, Stambro is a great guy. And speaking of, you worked at 16th Street Speedway and like Gas City, and North Vernon is closed down now. Are we in trying times in Indiana? Because there's a lot of good racetracks that sit and idle. They're not so far gone yet, but we're at a point where it's. We're kind of juggling back and forth.
Well, we are. Now, interestingly enough, I think this is pretty public news. Keith Kuntz and Clint Pursley were trying to get North Vernon, and they wanted to turn it into a microtrack. So, but my understanding is that they can't get a clear title on it.
That's the second time I've heard that.
I've heard that too
from someone else.
I raced there. Actually, most of my last racing I've done was at North Vernon.
Yeah.
So
I like North Vernon. It was an interesting racetrack.
Was you there the night when Levi Jones ballparked it in the pits?
Oh yeah.
And got back out before the race started again, they had to rebuild the whole car.
That was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. It wasn't the crash itself, because Brady Bacon's crash at Terre Haute was way more amazing. But they got the front axle fixed before they got the fence fixed.
Right.
Yeah, he come back out and run fourth.
Well,
from the tail.
To your question, Peregrine was on life support, and Joe Spiker doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, because he went in there and ran it for a couple of years when it looked like it was sold, or the reports were that it was sold, and now they've had new owners that actually put money into the thing.
Yeah, the facility is way nice. Kurt hasn't been there in a long time, but the facility it's not even the same place.
Actually, I've never been to Peregrine.
Oh, you've never been to Peregrine?
Never been there one time.
You've never been to Peregrine International Speedway.
No.
Yeah, straightaways are from here to Indianapolis.
Oh, yeah.
It's about as wide as Hopstock, but still just as long.
Right. So, that's good. Obviously, Bloomington's now got a new group going to come in, and that's good. I think Gas City's probably doomed. That property's probably a little...
Yeah, right where their location.
Their location, and I don't think the family's all that interested. North Vernon, maybe if they can get it. It's a difficult time for the sport.
Well, a lot of people don't realize
but
this.
Pittsburgh reopened.
That's what I was about to say. A lot of people don't realize this. Kokomo was on its last leg before it got a rebirth 25 years ago, and now Kokomo's won the they're just still doing improvements. I seen where they just took down the front stretch bleachers and everything.
Right. I announced the Kokomo for about 5 years when it was flat as a pancake, of course. And you're right. Ken Evans bought that track. He was a great guy. He was the driving force behind USAC getting into Indiana Sprint Week. That was his idea. But he banked on getting on television. He spent a lot of money on the lights and improvements. He lost some money. He actually ran the ASCS series there when the ASCS had no constituency, so we lost a lot of money on that. Yeah. And then we lost Vince Osmond in an accident, and I just took the wind out of his sails. And so you're right, it was a little bit iffy there. But it's, I still do like the fact that I did like the time when it ran every Sunday night. I'll admit that.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Yeah.
Kokomo. Just last week, I was talking to Shane Butler because, I announced for the American Sprint Car Tour, the Steel Block Series. And, his son Landon Butler won the championship. Yeah. And, we were talking, and Shane looked at me and said, "You got any pull at Kokomo? We want to run every Sunday because Landon is going 410 racing next year full time." And I said, do I got any pull at Kokomo? Hell, you're the one on TV every week with the guys. How do you want me to talk? I mean, give me their phone number. I'll plead the case, please. Yeah. Can we run every Sunday night?
Yeah. So I mean, it is a bit of a trying time. I do think, maybe it's through the streaming. I do think there's a group of people who discovered that there's this thing called short track racing, and it actually happens in your backyard.
Yeah.
Well. I'm glad you mentioned streaming, because I was going to go down this road. You were one of the first guys, you and Chet, that were, after COVID, you guys were on TV. You guys were, well, I call it TV because I watch it on TV, but you guys were the streaming guys. People say, well, streaming's hurting racing. It's it's killing the gate. Is it really? Because I know, like, I've got kids that I coached at basketball. I was a basketball coach. They had no idea what short track racing was. Right. And I've even got a kid now that races, and they race 50 times a year, and it was because during COVID we couldn't do anything else, so they stayed at my house and we watched TV. So having those official basketball practices at the house, so we had to, my wife had to cook for 15 kids, and I made them watch sprint car racing. I'm at the streaming. It may hurt some people, but like me, if it's within a 3-hour drive, I'm not staying home to watch it on TV. Like, streaming for me is what the old tape-tating was. Like, I used to get Sports Plus video every week. That's my streaming, because I go and watch the races still.
Right. I did write an article for Speed Sport where I began to ponder whether there might be a need for blackouts like we have in other sports. In other words, if you're
in a certain area,
within 100 miles,
if you're in a certain miles, because I can tell you where it does hurt.
Yeah,
it hurts. Like, for example, Terre Haute. So if there's a USAC race at Terre Haute, not that there's not fans at Terre Haute, not that there's fans across the river in Illinois, there are, but I'm just going to tell you, what you see are cars that are on 70 heading towards Terre Haute from Indianapolis, and on the way back afterwards. So the minute there is a 30% chance of rain, somebody says, well, I can just sit home and watch it on flow.
Right.
And I do think that hurts some. Let me give you the flip side, though. The flip side of this discussion for me, and I just brought this up with Richie Murray. I loved when I was, working a race on Saturday night, let's say Lincoln Park, and I could come home and I would turn on and I could watch the USAC CRA series, from Paris.
Yes.
And I'm friends with Scott DeLucio, the announcer,
and
I look forward to that. And I told him that series is almost out of sight, out of mind for me. I know who's won some races, and as much as I love USAC sport, I asked Richie the other day, who's the point leader in the CRA? Because I was not looped into that, because they made the decision they weren't going to stream those races.
Yeah.
And I think that hurt them.
Well, that's like me. Like last Saturday, I was at Lake Cumberland Speedway. We went down and supported a tribute race, a super late model a dirt super late model race. When I got home, this is 2 a.m. The NARC 410s feature was on, and my wife's like, "I'm going to bed." I'm like, "Not me." So I'm in the same ballpark. Like, if it wasn't for that, not that I wouldn't know who Justin Sanders is or anything, but there's a lot of guys out on the West Coast that now when they come east, I'm like, I've been watching that kid for 3 years now.
That's
so
right.
That's and
NARC After Dark. I saw that was their ad, which was a cool idea. I agree with that, and I remember they backed off, but I used to announce at Sonoma. I announced at Sonoma for 15 years. I was their track announcer, so I loved to go out to the NorCal. And I'd go to the races at Petaluma. Yep. And so when I was done, I loved watching Petaluma on TV or Marysville, some of those places.
All right.
So that, to me, that was great. And in that case, the issue is, for a fan of the sport, maybe you get introduced to NARC racing, and maybe you're out there and you go, you know what, I want to go to the races.
While I'm here, we're going to go.
Go to the racetrack.
Yeah, that's my wife too. Every time if we plan a trip, I'm looking for the closest racetrack. She knows we're going to probably try to go to the racetrack one night out of the vacation.
Right,
so,
right.
Well, we've always done. We take a lot of vacations together.
Yeah.
We were a couple guys that raced together, and our dads raced together. Right. And this is a funny story. We've told it on the podcast before, but we'll tell you. So, we race at the same track, and we associate. Hey, how you doing? But we went to Indiana Sprint Week. It was when Levi Jones left the racetrack. So we're standing there, and we're BSing, and the next night we go to Lawrenceburg, and me and my wife sat down, and here comes Kurt, and I said, hold on, we're both from the Louisville area. If we're going to drive to these races every night of the week, let's at least ride together. So we exchanged phone numbers and been going to the racetrack for 15 years.
It's a great
We've probably been to 300 races.
Probably at least 300 races together.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm like, we're both coming from the same area. Our dads raced together for 25 years. Wow. If you're going to drive to Lawrenceburg on a Tuesday night, I'm going to drive to. Let's ride together.
Yeah,
that's smart.
Yeah,
but that's a great part about racing.
Yeah, and that's another thing.
See, but let's illustrate that point. Again, I got friends Sam and Diane Warwick that live in Oskaloosa, Iowa. I met them in Knoxville 40 years ago. I'm friends with them to this day. If I go to Knoxville, I sit with them. We talk all the time via text or except. They're just wonderful people. I met him at the racetrack. My friend Dean Martin from Oklahoma, I met him at the racetrack.
Yeah.
I could go on and on about people I met at the racetrack that I want to see, right? Now, that's not going to happen if you just stay in your living room.
Right,
Exactly. That's what I was going to get at. The generation, the younger kid generation, because I coached high school basketball, and I'm getting older myself. I'm no spring chicken, but, I've had, I see how kids interact, and, kids they can't even have conversations,
right?
Because they shoot each other a text in the same damn room. They shoot each other a text, and so you're gonna need streaming to get to younger kids because that's the way they watch TV. You got your TV on. These kids don't even watch TV. They sit there and watch on their phone, and everything's an app. And so I get the bit, but to grow the sport, we're gonna need something to reach out to the kids. And here's the thing: once we get them there, they're going to be fine.
Right.
But it's just getting them there.
Yeah, it's funny. That's why in one of my roles at USAC, I actually had the idea of having an ice cream social at the USAC office, and we did.
Yeah.
So, and actually, Shelley Kinzer-Clayton actually donated some money, and I got a bunch of donations. And the whole point, and I was actually on local television, I said, look, here's the problem. Here's the problem we got. If I'm at a racetrack in Indiana, and I look out from my booth, in the crowd, there's way too many people that look like me, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
We have to have young people involved and interested, and it's what you said. So I wanted to get the kids there. I wanted the drivers there. I wanted to get an autograph. I wanted to make a connection there. So if their parents take them to the racetrack, there's a driver that all of a sudden they're interested. By the way, that's one of the great. Tim Clausen told me in the early story I did on Brian, he said, I don't know if I'm such a fan of him peacocking. That was his word. Peacocking around in the grandstand. And Lawrenceburg was where he did it the most because there was just easy access there to the grandstand. And he'd go up. But that's why he had friends that were kids to people who were 75 years old.
Yeah.
Because he interacted with them. And so the connection was there. When I first started going to races in Knoxville, on a regular Saturday night show, which I went to a lot because I grew up in Kansas City. So we go up to Knoxville, and the races would be run. They'd be run efficiently. You know what happened? The drivers came underneath the grandstands and drank beer with the fans. Yeah. They just hung out with the fans, and they made friends.
Yeah.
And so sometimes if they needed something, they needed a place to stay, or something to help. Guess what? They had this whole support system of people who were interested in their lives.
Well, my wife, she's a fan of Ricky Lewis. And the reason, I'm a fan of Ricky Lewis because of the way he drives. But she's a fan of Ricky Lewis because she's seen him interacting with kids at the T-shirt table. So, he's one of those guys, he is out there, not promoting himself, toting himself. He's just available. Hey, you want to come over here? You want to BS about racing? We'll do that. We need more of that.
Right, and the other part of it is, guess what? It's good business.
Yeah.
Listen, Brady Bacon's no fool.
That's what I was about to get to.
Brady Bacon and Ciciana, in terms of the merchandise, they were way ahead of the game with USAC. The fact that he always goes out, if he doesn't have a problem, to sign autographs. They work hard on that end of the game. That gets them up and down the road. Well, it works for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about Brady Bacon is, you know, I can never pronounce her name. I
did it.
I'm calling her Exana. I'm always messing it up. But you know, and his little girls, they're adorable. But like, they're geared towards kids. But then they have kids. All their shirts, even when his cars wasn't, everything's bright colors. Everything's palm trees. Everything's geared towards, hey, look at us. You know, when you walk through, and what's funny is, like I told my wife, I said, you know, I got on a lime green shirt now. You know, I was always a black t-shirt or white t-shirt guy, and then now I got a closet full of pastels, and it's because of guys like Brady Bacon. You know, and you know that they were the first that took the merchandise game to the next level in the USAC world. I remember Rich Vogler years ago. He had the little midget shirt, and it had like a rainbow behind it. You know, and I still got one of them shirts. But I remember everybody's shirt was either like black, white, or red. And, you know, and Vogler was the first guy that, and, you know, I don't know if he was that much ahead of his time or knowing Vogler, somebody at the thrift shop had 300 of those shirts and he printed a midget on it.
But I mean, again, that all of this hangs together in terms of growing the sport.
Yeah.
All of it hangs together.
And speaking of which, I want to talk about something. Logan Stevie just won the national sprint card, so that makes him the 8th driver to win the Triple Crown.
Right.
I don't know exactly how to put this, like, because we were talking to some guys at the racetrack, and like this is where my issue is, like, these guys, of course they're late model fans, but they didn't even know what USAC's Triple Crown was, and I was like, are you serious? Like, did you guys not have any racing newspapers or anything? And they're older guys. Explain to people how hard it is to be a Triple Crown champ, because a lot of people look at them and like, well, it's the same car. No, they are 3 totally different race cars.
No, it is something. Now, it's interesting because, Pancho Carter was the first to win all 3 titles. But in Pancho, in fairness to Pancho, and one thing people can understand is, for a long time, USAC didn't care if a midget race was scheduled the same time as a sprint car race. They did not care.
It was like that still into part of the 90s, really.
Right, so the midgets, the midgets actually a couple times had dates on the same day.
Yeah.
So it was impossible to do what Tony Stewart did in 1995 for Pancho Carter. But the fact that Tony Stewart did it when he did it was just so eye-popping that he won, the midget sprint and Silver Crown title.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but did Stewart won the Western States title that year too, didn't he?
No. Both.
Okay. Because we were talking about that the other day. I was like, I'm pretty sure it was right there at the same time. Yeah. But okay. I didn't mean to cut you off, but no, I knew you would know for sure.
Yeah.
So.
No, he didn't. He went out there about it.
Yeah.
But just now I think it's even a little bit more miraculous because midget racing is so different.
Yeah.
It's so intense. But you have the quick acting midgets, you have the sheer power of the sprint cars, and then the finesse and the sort of brain power it takes to win a Silver Crown race. And some cannot do that. I mean, they can't make the transition. Now, for a long time, there was a notion that a good sprint car driver couldn't be good midget drivers didn't make good sprint car drivers. Well, in fact, it took a long time for Tracy Hines, who's a member of the Triple Crown Club, to get a sprint car ride. He had to kind of convince people that he could do that. So there was a sort of prohibition against that. But it is incredibly difficult to do it. The stamina, the working on the cars, the switching gears, it is pretty amazing to have pulled it off. Yeah. And there's reason only getting done it. And of course, the only 2 to do it in 1 year were JJ and Tony Stewart.
But when JJ and Tony and I'm thinking Hines, they all ran pavement and they did it it was extremely hard the way they did it. I mean, because you were running both type cars.
Yeah, the only difference there is, I will say this, the difference is that, let's take the Silver Crown Championship, but I love the Silver Crown cars. But the one thing that you can say is, at the beginning there are only a few guys who can win the title. Because there's only a few guys who have both rides.
Right.
So you immediately understand that universe is a little bit small. But you still got to do it.
Yeah.
So, how did Logan Seavey finally get over the hump? That team improved their payment program. They made that a point of emphasis to improve their payment program. Now, Cody Swanson's better on the dirt than some people realize, particularly on the miles. He's very good.
Yeah.
But, right off the bat, 2 years ago, I would have thought right off the bat that Cody was going to win again because he finished second in Belleville the first race of the year. And I'm going, well, boy, he just walked out of here with a big lead because we know what's going to happen to the pavement. He's so good. So that universe is small. But the sprint cars and midgets, there was you ran them both, and you had to be good on both of them, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, because I remember one of those days I was at Winchester, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm just walking through the pits, and Jack Hewitt, he was sitting there, and I can't remember who it was. I'm thinking it may have been Darlin. I'm pretty sure it was Darlin in the Arctic Cat car. Right. Because they're putting next to each other, and Dave says, "Well, Jack, what are you going to do on tire compound?" And Jack Hewitt goes, "I'm just looking to get back to damn Ohio."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's like, even guys like that was like, God, we're running these high banks, on the pavement. But, yeah, Jack's like, I don't care what they put on it. I just want to drive to Ohio. I just want to go east. He's like,
that's Jack for you.
Yeah, but it was so funny. I was sitting there and I was like, because, Jack Hewitt's this big star. I'm like, damn, he's ready to get out of here, So I know for a while, and the dangers of the Salem and Winchester, and sprint car safety, and, we lost a lot of guys. So, I get it, but, as a fan that loves dirt sprint car racing, I do miss the sprint cars on the half mile. I know the 500 racing stuff is now, but it's just not the same.
Well, I just love Salem and Winchester. I don't hide that. Winchester is the mystique of it, the mystique of the two tracks, and the history of them. I will say that I still, particularly after I had been here a while and I was much more deeply involved in the sport, all of a sudden those are your friends out there, and you are nervous for them.
Yeah.
Because things can happen in a hurry. You might have heard me tell this story on one of the Flow broadcasts, but it's a true story. I was the state director of mental health in Indiana for a while, and it was Dave Cassidy, my boss at 16th Street Speedway, who told me that the drivers in the 50s, in particular late 50s, maybe in the 60s, but probably in the 50s, late 50s, they had a black market connection with a psychiatrist at the LaRue Carter State Hospital, which is in downtown Indianapolis.
Yeah.
The first ever psychiatric drug was called Milltown. It's a major tranquilizer. And they had a black market with this guy where they would get Milltown, and some of them would take a small dose before they raced at Winchester and Salem to calm their nerves.
Well, yeah, I've raced at both of them racetracks. So
I've raced at Salem, not Winchester.
Yeah, I've raced at both of them racetracks. So for the nerves, have you ever been to Tazewell Speedway in East Tennessee?
No, but it sounds like I should.
You need to, because Salem and Winchester, it's a third mile, the Winchester with red clay, and the straightaways are banked 30 degrees, and the turns are banked like 38. It's like the steepest banked racetrack in the country. Yeah. And the racing isn't like great for side by side, but you can watch a late model. A super late model, they'll run a 10-second lap.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I know Kyle Larson said one time, he was going to go run the Rumbly late model, and he was like, yeah, I'm gonna get him a sprint car race here, because he hasn't been there. He's just watching videos. And when he got there, he goes, yeah, I don't think we need to be running sprint cars here.
It's funny. Belleville used to be banked like that on the straightaways too. It was banked all the way around.
Yeah, but the high banks, is always part of the draw to open wheel racing, in my opinion. Like Eldora, everybody, you got to go to Eldora, the high banks. But, Indiana's bull rings, they're not like they're all flat. Well, they're all banked too.
No,
so.
but going back to Salem, I remember I was doing I was going out doing, what would I call them? It was kind of a pre-race program for IndyCar teams. I'm using a word. It was like an early press conference. And so I did one with Ed Carpenter's team in Indianapolis. And, in some circles in the IndyCar ranks for a while, Ed took a little bit of crap because they thought he was just there because, He was Tony George's stepson and the whole name. Well, Ed Carpenter, let me remind everybody, went from quarter midgets to sprint cars to Silver Crown and lights. He did every single step along the way to get there, which I respect the heck out of.
Yeah.
And somebody, it's unusual for a moderator to get involved, but somebody sort of asked a question that I thought sort of questioned his pedigree. And I said, Ed Carpenter's won 2 sprint car races on the high banks of Salem. And when you've done that, you don't have to apologize to anybody for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, ask Tony
Especially in
Stewart.
the sprint car, yeah.
Ask Tony Stewart, because Tony Stewart left the ballpark.
Oh, he most certainly left the ballpark.
Yeah,
and lived to tell it.
But yeah, so yeah, like I said, the sprint cars, and I just love non-wing sprint car racing. But like to me, we went down last week or 2 weeks ago to West Memphis, Arkansas, the ditch, for a wing 360, and a lot of people say, well, like non-wing fans, I'm not a big wing guy. 360s kind of drive like non-wing sprint cars because you have to hustle the car around, because everybody, it's kind of like crate racing, it's momentum. So, when we were down at the ditch, I told Chris, man, I would love for USAC to come back just one more time, because now there's the PowerEye series and there's cars in the area to support the traveling, so maybe if you can talk to somebody, you can nudge them along just for a couple fans.
Well, a funny story about West Memphis and USAC. USAC did go down there in the Ricky Hood years, because Ricky Hood was a sprint car champion, obviously Hooker Hood, legendary from Memphis, and so this was like a coming home thing for Ricky Hood. It was a triumphant return. A friend of mine from Oklahoma went, and he came back and he couldn't wait to tell me the story. He, first of all, and I'm sure it's a little bit better now, but he took a video camera of the grandstands, and at the grandstands, the wood were warped like they used to be at Paragon. And Bloomington, but the problem was they were in the air, right?
Really in the air.
So the announcer said, imagine this. Imagine your insurance guy hearing this, right? The announcer said, okay, we're going to do the national anthem, but I need you all not to stand up at the same time.
Well, that sounds about like the ditch. Their front stretch bleachers are all metal now. They've been reworked.
Sure.
They're still like, to me, it seems like you're bungee jumping when you get up there because they're so high. That was like every time we go to the racetrack, we talk about positives and negatives. Not to like rain on anybody's parade, but we just say, this could be better. Just tell people out there it's never been. And the funny thing was, the only negative we had about West Memphis was the bleachers, and it wasn't because of the structure. It was like it's like we're going on a damn hike every time we get up there.
Well, to me, when it comes to a racetrack, this is my own personal thing. There's several things that you need to do to get people back. Right. First of all, you need to start on time. Right.
Yes. Right.
Which is difficult for some to do. And then you have to move the program along, and you got to end a reasonable. Those are important things. You also have to have reasonably good food that's not overpriced at a concession stand that works. And the other thing is, you'd better have at least, if the wives or girlfriends are along, you'd better have at least a reasonably clean bathroom, because they are not going to come back.
Right.
If they have to deal with that.
Well, that's funny because I tell this story all the time. Like, I can tell my wife, we are going to Arkansas this weekend. We're going to Ohio. She doesn't care. But once we get there, I don't care. The guys we can use behind the tree. It doesn't matter. The pits can be rough. But please, please, please have a clean bathroom for the women. Because
they're not going to come back.
Listen, promoters, it's really simple. If she's happy, we can go. If she's not,
right,
we can still go. But we gotta. It's on us when we get home.
Well, and it's like this. I mean, and it's the other part of it, which is, and again, more men take a role in this. So I don't want to make this all the women's problem. But if woman comes in, the baby has to change a diaper and has to go into that bathroom and it's a piece of junk. They aren't coming back.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, those are really simple things you can do. I think the rest of us will put up with things. You'll put up with things. I mean, we all have been to racetracks. things happen out of control.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can't help it if a car, tumbles and pokes a hole in the fence. You can't do anything about that. You can't do anything about that if a transformer blows up and you lost your lights. That's going to happen. But the things that are in your control that you can reasonably control to make this a good experience for them, because it gets back to what you guys are talking about. There's a period of my time when I'd go to the racetrack with my buddies, right? And they'd have a cooler full of beer, and I'm happy there to be with them. And frankly, I didn't give a darn. I could have sat there and talked with those guys, and I didn't make a darn bit of difference. It's like the teenagers I see all the time that in Bloomington, they're on dates. You know what they're hoping? They're hoping the race goes on forever.
Yeah, all night. Yeah,
right.
Let's just no curfew.
They don't care. But because of the world we have discussed and described here together on a couple of different points, people's attention spans are not there anymore.
No.
They are not. And you have to keep it moving and concise. And it better be about the time it takes to do the football game. I mean, so we're talking, right? And I got a baseball game in the background here. The World Series is on. And I'm a great baseball fan. And I don't care. I can sit in a baseball game. I'm entertained. I'm thinking about the game. I'm thinking about positions. I went to a game with my daughter, and I'm saying, Nikki, there's a lot going on. She goes, what do you mean lots going on? I go, what's the count? Where's the runner? Why is that guy over in that? Why is he playing there? Why is the catcher set up there? I said, everything's happening here. It's not in front of you, but you got to think about it. You got to think real hard about what's happening at this moment in this game, right? Okay, but I have an attention span that I do that, right? And I grew up doing that.
Right.
If you're in a hardwired generation where you're looking at your phone and you're playing games and it's fast paced, you're not hardwired to enjoy that.
Yeah.
And so we have to adapt what we do to make this palatable for a younger group of fans. I'm easily amused.
Well, that's
Yeah.
So
I can just watch people walking up and down the stands.
exactly.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, well, especially if they've drunk a little bit out of Odora. You don't got to go anywhere. You can sit right there off turn 4 and have the time of your life, and now you know the race is going on.
Right.
But so we, my wife and I, we kind of raised her little brother, and we take him to the racetrack, and he's a cell phone kid, and but like you talking about the baseball game, like I would take him to the races, and we would stand in the pits, and I would tell him, this division's on the track, look what's going on over here. He's turning. What are you talking about? I'm like, you see that guy that's lining all these cars up the next 3 heat races? Then he's like, yeah, but I mean, I never really knew all that went on. I was like, that's because your face is buried in the damn phone.
Well, I mean, a perfect example is my son was a really good kid to take to sporting events. He was very attentive. He really was, and remarkably so. But he asked me to go with him to see some of his favorite bands, which I sort of like, in San Francisco. And I knew San Francisco well because I went to Sonoma. So I said, yeah, I'll go out there. And he's living in Colorado. I picked him up. We met at the airport dinner. We go out there. So we're staying in a hotel. We're down by the bay. And we're walking someplace, and I look over, and I finally said, damn it, Reed. I said, there's 3 seals like swimming right there. There's an oar boat that's about 300 feet long going by. You don't see that stuff every day, and you're looking at your phone. Look around.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I got a grandson the same way.
yeah.
Look around.
Well, my wife, she's a picture person.
Right.
Like, she takes pictures of everything, everywhere.
Right.
And it's great because, we can always go back and look at it. But, I tell her all the time, I'm like, sometimes why do we need a picture? Like, can't we just look at it?
Right.
And she's like, well, you're always going to want these pictures. I'm like, well, I don't want to be trying to find the damn camera on my phone and miss what we're looking at.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the way I am. And
I usually tell everybody now, say, look, if you wanted to see it, you should have been here with us.
Yeah.
But again, I think those are things, as you mentioned, challenges and where we're going. I think a lot of people are really trying. Don't get me wrong. And I just want the sport to remain vibrant.
Yeah.
That's the way I am. Like, I'm a big advocate for kids. Like I said, I coached, and my wife and I, we could never have kids. So, I've got over 400 kids, so to speak. kids need to be involved, and that's just one thing that I'm just so hard on. Like, you know, the Sportsdrome Speedway there in Jeffersonville. I grew up there, and you know, we're gonna do an interview with the promoter, you know, on down the road. But you know, I grew up there, and I was just like, I was one of those guys. I don't care if this place closes down. I'm tired of the BS. Blah blah blah. Well, you know, my brother races there still, and like, you know, I always try to go once a year because I've been there every year I've been born. You know, and you know, I walked in this year, and you know, first thing is when I walk in, everybody that sees me there is like, "Where'd you get rained out at?" Because they know I got rained out somewhere, or I wouldn't be there. But you know, we're walking down the backstretch, or behind the bleachers. I'm sorry, and the kids are running under the bleachers playing, and you know, I told my wife, I was like, you know, I've always kind of mouthed this place because it's not my cup of tea, but they're doing the same stuff I did when I was a kid. Like, I don't want any place to close down. You know, just for that reason alone, just because, I mean, the kids were interactive and enjoying, and I don't have a problem with Sportsdrome. It's just, you know, it's not my cup of tea anymore. And I just was watching the kids play, and I told my wife, I said, you know, she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, not really," because that was me 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you know, and I just, you know, I can't, you know, we have to get kids in the race. I don't care if they don't even watch a race. Just get them there, get them where they're going every week. They'll eventually catch on and watch.
That's right. But your point being, so I grew up in Kansas City, Kansas, actually. And so my main racetrack was the old Lakeside Speedway. There's a newer Lakeside Speedway, but the old Lakeside's gone. Riverside Stadium it's gone. Olympic Stadium, gone. Savannah, Missouri, gone. Marshall, Missouri, gone. I mean, these are places I went. They're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not only gone, they're gone.
They're gone.
They're gone. And it's like, and Adrian, Missouri, gone. And so that's the big concern. And maintaining the ones that we've got and trying to make them vibrant is really important. But your point is well taken. You know, I remember there was a great Indianapolis Star put out a book for the 75th anniversary of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And there was a picture of this old snake pit. Of course, there's you know, half-naked girls and guys, and they're all got beer. And the caption was, some of these kids actually grow up to be fans. And that was the point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it started. But then they kept going. And that's what we need to do. That's
what me and Kurt was talking. Like, you know, last week I was down at Lake Cumberland Speedway, and you know, the couple sitting to the right of us, it was her 5th ever dirt race, and you know, the racetrack was rubbered up, locked down after a long feature, and you know, I'm kind of jaded. I'm just like, oh man, I'm gonna be home about 3 a.m. But I know some guys that run our tour, and they're running the mod, so I'm gonna stay and watch. And you know, I'm thinking if I stay, I'm gonna be 4 a.m. You know, but this lady, she was, you know, just having the time of her life. She's like, you know, the guys are trying to run up top, and you know, she's just loving it. And I told my wife when we was leaving, I was like, you know, I just take for granted. I assume that everybody goes to the racetrack 100 times a year because that's what I've done for 30 years, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I was just like, man.
I wrote a column about this very thing. I went to Belleville. I covered the 305 Sprint Car Nationals a couple of years ago. It's the first time I went out there for that event. So I go out there by myself, actually, and it's kind of fun. But we're going to run the feature. And they haul out these stock cars in which there's one person controlling the wheel.
The old cruiser division.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, we know what you're talking about.
And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? I have to sit here and watch this crap. You know, like, are you kidding me? This is the Belleville 305 Nationals, da-da-da-da-da. Well, they get out on the quarter mile, and, of course, they're doing what they do. And I look, and the crowd is roaring. I mean, they're roaring, right? And I went, you know, this is supposed to be fun. And these people right now are having fun.
Right.
And I'm being the old curmudgeon, the serious race guy with the knit brow, thinking this is serious business. Well, you know what? It is entertainment. And these people were entertained. And I got a good jolt reminding me of that.
Well, that's the way I was. Like, you know, I'm driving home, and I don't even know this lady. My wife's talking to her, and, you know, I have no idea who she is. But I'm thinking, I wish I could be more like that. Like, I really do. Like she was like, oh, my God, look at him run the wall. I'm thinking, he ran the wall because he hit the wall down the back stretch going in.
Right.
But like
right.
so I try to always, and that's why I go to like micro events, TQ midgets,
right.
Go-kart race, like, because when you walk in and you see the kids and not the kids, the grandparents, the parents, right. We're almost an hour and a half into this. I don't want to keep you all night. But racing, is it about competitiveness? Yes. But we always say this. It's about relationships.
It is.
And it's the greatest thing. There could be so much going wrong in the world. I don't care what politics you choose, what religion you choose. You go to the racetrack, you're just there at the racetrack and you want A, to see a good race, and B, like a fat guy like me, you want the best food they got, and you'll try the worst food just to try something else.
No, I have been obviously, just in terms of where I'm at with my life, I reflect a lot more, and now I think about. And my wife said this to me the other day. The great world of outlaw and traditional sprinter, just a great race driver, Ron Schumann. Ron Schumann called me on the phone the other day. We were sitting there where you were, and Ron Schumann called me on the phone, and there was a reason why I called. We're chatting, and my wife said, "Could you believe in your life that someday Ron Schumann would call you on the phone?" I said, "No." It's still stunning to me.
Yeah,
I was a fan. You bought a Ron Schumann sleep shirt at Knoxville, and I think about the people that I've had a chance to have a relationship with, at all levels. I mean, I do some events for USAC for a benevolent foundation. I asked racers to come, and the original Kevin Thomas came the other day, and Cody comes, those Swanson, Jerry Coons, who I just admire so greatly. And I think to myself, I've had a relationship with these people for a long time that's very deep and very personal for me, that I've been privileged to somehow be a part of their life and watch them exercise their skill. And to me, that's been the great thing. I mean, you've heard me tell this story. I've told this story 1,000 times. I was announcing the BC39, and I got a text, and it was from Emmett Hahn, and Emmett Hahn said, "Thanks for saying nice things about my grandson," right?
Yeah.
Emmett Hahn is the reason I got stuck in this thing. Yeah. I went to a race in Tulsa, Oklahoma because a baseball game rained out, and I sort of liked racing, and it was him and Ray Crawford in front of a packed grandstands, and that was it. I was hooked. Yeah. And I tell Emmett Hahn all the time, I go, "USOB, you're responsible for me devoting so much of my life to this stupid sport." And the fact that, because listen, where else do you experience that? Think about that, right?
Yeah.
Where else? I mean, I'm a great sports fan. I mean, all sports.
Yeah, LeBron's not calling me.
LeBron, I watched Peyton Manning for years, and I admire Peyton Manning, his skills, his how he handles things. I've watched Caitlin Clark this year. She's unbelievable how she handles the media and all that. I'm not going to be personal with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's not going to come call me on the phone. But these people, the biggest stars of our discipline, and all of the racing disciplines, you can really know them as people.
Well, that's funny you say that because Frank Kimmel was the great so my dad, Kurt and them, they grew up together, but my dad raced with his dad and everything, and they have a NASCAR night. It was Tony Stewart's rookie year, and they're having it at Lawrenceburg, and and they're running late models. And Richie, my neighbor that my dad got into the business, he was Frank's tire guy for all these years, and so Frank comes by the house. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to Lawrenceburg Thursday. You want to ride up?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So we ride up there, and we get in the racetrack, and they got these tables set up, and they got Stewart and Schrader, Wallace, and Kim. I told Frank, I said, "You really think people's gonna stand in your line?" Because I've known him my whole life, and Frank's like, "Probably not," but how Frank is all modern. Probably not, but so we're standing there, and then we're leaving, and after the race, and Frank's terrible in the late model, and we're joking on him on the way home, but I said, "Frank, this is gonna come off weird, but like, I never really realized you were a star, because my whole life." It's like, I'm gonna run over Kimmel's real quick, or you know what I'm saying? Like it's
just Frank.
It's just Frank, and you know, and his Bill, and I'm like, they're not like everybody like. Oh my God! Like you go to Salem, like right now, like Chuck Barnes Jr. and Chuck Barnes Sr.
Great racer.
Because the dad won everything, and like I walk up and like I'm smacking Chucky in the head. We went to high school together. I'm like,
Chucky's a great racer.
You know what I'm saying? So like, it's funny because you talk about Kevin Briscoe and those are like people I was looking up to. I was like, man, they are so badass, and they're just people, and that's what I love about our sport is they're just.
Yeah.
If you reach, that's like me reaching out to you. I reached out to you. I said, I follow you on Twitter and I've talked to you at the racetrack a couple times. I'm sure you don't remember because everybody comes up. You know what I'm saying? But, I reached out and I was like, I really want to do this interview. And he was like, sure, anytime. And I'm thinking, damn, it was that easy, huh? All these years.
I got a great Kimmel story. So I'm working, and it's a neat one to me on several occasions. I went up there and I was going to work 2 days, and Richard Deaton was the GM then. He ran the track for the Thompsons, and Richard, we're great friends, and he put me up in the little Salem Hotel. And
that was the only place you could stay.
I stayed at the Salem Hotel, and I wake up in the morning on race day, and it is pouring. I mean, it is just pouring, cats and dogs, and I'm thinking, oh, good Lord. And so, but I go in, and there's a driver's meeting like at 10 or 11 in the morning. And there's a couple things that are noteworthy to me. First of all, Ken Schrader is there. In other words, Ken Schrader's a big star then, but Ken Schrader is there.
Yeah.
He's going to be in that driver's meeting because he's a driver. Then that impressed me. And Ron Dreger of ARCA got up and said, I remember this very well. He says, we're going to get this race in. And it's important because this is a place where ARCA really matters. And that to me was self-aware. In other words, when we go to Daytona or something like that, we're ARCA.
We're just here.
But here it's a big deal, right? And so then there was a conversation about how to conduct yourself at Salem. If you're not fast, don't run here, don't run here, don't run here. And some driver's wife, I think, actually raised her hand and said, well, then how are you supposed to get any better? Right? And believe it or not, I think it was Andy Belmont. But Andy Belmont raised his hand and says, well, I'll tell you what. Well, first of all, rent the track. Rent the track and practice. And he goes, and here's another thing. He says, go ask Bill and Frank. He goes, go ask Bill and Frank Kimmel to help you. He said, they'll help you. I'll guarantee they'll help you, and I'll guarantee you something else. They are not worried about you beating them.
There for about 5 years, Frank was unbeatable at Salem.
That's a funny story about Frank, though, because when I grew up, I was like 16 years old, 16, just started racing. And my dad raced before me. Well, me and my dad started running the same division, and I started beating my dad a lot. So every time we'd walk in Kimmel's shop over there, Frank would say, there's Kirk Bennett's dad. They wouldn't say Emil, they wouldn't say my dad's name, so it's funny. But Frank, man, he helped me out tremendously when I first started because he'd come up to me when I come in, he'd tell me how to run a track, and then he'd come in and he'd say, okay, now when you're coming off turn 2 and the guy's in front of you where you're looking at, I'm just watching what he's doing. He said, no, you need to be watching in the straightaway and watching where that guy's doing going in the corner because as soon as you get around this guy, you'll know what he's doing and you can get around him.
He was fun to watch race.
Well, the funny thing about Frank is when they ran the street stock nationals at Kentucky Speedway, so I was racing dirt, and my dad wanted to my dad was getting up in age, and my dad was like, he's tired of getting in at 4 a.m, and he's like, can we build a CRA street stock? And I'm sure, whatever, if I'm hanging out with my dad, we're racing, I don't care, whatever.
Yeah.
So we build it and we go up there and I go out and I practice, and Frank comes in and goes, you're not really having fun, are you? He comes down there and talk to me. I said, we had wicker bills and a gear. I said, no, Frank, it's like driving down the Gene Snyder. And he goes, I think you should let your dad run. I said, I think you're right. So I said, Dad, you want to run this? He said, yeah. So, my dad ran the race, and he ran like 15th or something. And as soon as the race was over, I came to Frank. I said, hey, Frank. He said, yeah. I said, you do anything tonight? He said, no. I said, I'm going to take you to a real racetrack now. And he goes, what? I said, we're going back to Lawrenceburg. He goes, oh, hell no. He's like, you're not having no fun, are you? I'm like, we're riding around with a foot on the floor going nowhere. I'm like, this is terrible. He's like,
good man.
He's like, don't say that shit in the driver's meeting. You know, Frankie's like,
Right.
you know, and I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. You know, I'm just going to let it be.
Yeah, great guy.
But you know, and it goes back to relationships, you know, and as we're winding down here, one thing I want to ask you about is, you know, working with your colleague Brad all these years. Like, I think honestly, you guys were the first duo that like, you know, not just announced races, but you guys kind of did like play-by-play broadcast. It's kind of like listening to a sporting event over the radio while you was at the racetrack, and that always captivated me. I'm like, man, that is cool. Nobody's doing that. How did that come about? And because I've done like dual events, you know, with an it's hard to get timing and stuff down. Like,
correct.
Like, how do you do that?
Right. That's interesting because, for example, I mean, before I answer the question directly, you're right. For example, Johnny Gibson and I worked a couple times together, and it didn't work, and that's because we could never get the timing down right. And Johnny was used to being solo.
Well, and that's, you know, not to cut you off, but that's two of the best in the business.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying.
But we knew it. But we knew it.
Yeah.
And I'm not pointing a finger.
Yeah.
It just didn't work out. But in Brad's case, what happened is, it was a kind of funny deal. I came, again, a sight unseen to Bloomington, and I'm working with a guy named Kerry Pittman, who's since passed away. And Kerry Pittman was a really interesting guy. And so I was going to do the pits and had a wireless mic and stuff like that, which didn't work half the time, I might add. But
anyway, and they still don't anywhere.
Yeah, it was just so frustrating. But anyway, late in the year, Brad came, and he had done some work at Lincoln Park. And the great thing about Brad was Brad's dad, Bob Dickinson, who was a teacher at Ben Davis High School, but he had a sprint car shop called Competition Welding. He built sprint cars down in what we call the Gasoline Alley of Indianapolis. So Brad had been around racing almost his whole life in Indiana. And so Brad came in. Brad also had a great voice. He had a great classic, deep, baritone voice. And so he came down and worked a race. And then I got a call from Mike Miles, you know, in the winter or something. And he says, hey, I'm going to make a change in the announcing program. And I thought, damn, I've announced 1 year and I'm fired. And because the wireless never worked. And he goes, no, we're going to hire Brad, and we're going to basically tell Kerry not to come back. So it's you and Brad. That was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Because of what you described. We had almost instant chemistry. And the great thing was I really knew a lot about USAC and the World of Outlaws and big series. Brad really knew local racing much better than I did. I mean, I didn't know some of the connections of some of the guys. Like you knew, guys both knew. Yeah. You knew whose dads had raced together for years. If they weren't a big name, I didn't really know who some of these people were. Brad did. And Brad sometimes in the summer worked in his dad's shop, so he had a lot of information. He was a little more mechanical than I was. So it was perfect. And so we quickly developed a bit of a stick. And I do think we were different. I mean, and the other thing I think that had happened is I was really, really big on prep. I mean, pretty early on, I remember I announced the first truck race at IRP and the Kroger 200 and races like that and ASA races. And I was making my own performance chart. You know, this is pre-internet, by going through Speed Sport News and creating it.
Yeah.
So when NASCAR came for the Kroger 200, the first one I announced, I got a call from the media center, and the PR person said, hey, the NASCAR guys are like all over you, like son of a gun. They can't believe that you are as prepared as you are. And that's what I always tried to do. So I had done all that background work before it was readily available. And Brad just had a natural gift of gab and the deep voice. So we just complemented each other so incredibly well. And that's why we took off and we got all the gigs we did. Now, I got the IndyCar gig, but I got him on that gig because we were the first announcers at Kentucky Speedway along with Gary Lee. And the guy was going to hire me for IndyCar, says, hey, I like your buddy. And I said, well, we work really well together. So that just worked out incredibly well for us. And we had a great deal of fun. I mean, we just had, I'll tell you the funniest story ever about Brad and I. It's one I've told before, but it's been a while. We went to Gateway, Worldwide Technology Raceway. Now we're going to announce a NASCAR truck race. It's early in the morning and it's rained a little bit. And we're in the booth. The story is so funny to me. I wish it was on GoPro. But I'm sitting at the table with Brad, and we're doing our notes and preparing, trying to get ready. And Brad is like the worst passenger of a car that you've ever met in your life, right? He's one of those guys who go, hey, there's something going on up there, and I go, yeah, that's a red light, Brad.
Yeah.
And we're going to stop for it. Right?
Yeah, those red tail lights are letting me know.
Yeah. So he's just he's a nervous guy like that. But we're up in the booth and we're working, and he says, we hear this racket, and he goes, that noise is just driving me crazy up there. I go, Brad, Jesus. I said, they're moving the cameras around and the cable for the broadcast and that whole 9 yards. I don't know what you're worried about. And I'm looking down, guys, and I hear something that sounds like a bomb went off. It's like kaboom, right? And I look over, and Brad's chair is on the ground, and he is nowhere, right? Nowhere. And I go, what on earth? And I look, and there is a hawk that is sitting on the table, a big hawk, and he's looking at me and screaming. And I'm thinking, I'm a pretty rational guy. I go, oh my God, Brad got turned into a hawk. Where'd he go? Yeah. And this hawk had fallen out of a drop ceiling and made a nest in there in the winter. And that stuff happened all the time. And so that just kept us going for so long. And, I still miss working with him. We came back to Lincoln Park once last year, but that really worked for us. And I really think that, and I got to be careful here because I don't think this is as simple as I'm putting it, but I think there were times when people that were doing these things, they just sort of got drafted into doing it. Yeah. And they were, and I was shocked when I went out with the IndyCar and even NASCAR. Sometimes I'm going, did you do any prep? I mean, you just, you're a radio guy, right? Hey guys. Yeah. And you show up and you're not even prepared to announce a race. So we were prepared and we developed that stick, and that's why we got the work we did.
Well, it's funny you say that because, when Matt, the guy that runs that series that I work for, last year he says, hey, I want you to be my tech man. Hey, would you be interested in becoming a tech man? And I said, Matt, not really. I said, because a lot of these guys' cars, I put bodies on them, I work on them. I said, no, not really. And I was just joking because I've never announced anything. And I said, but if you need an announcer, it's air conditioned booth. I'm getting a little older. That'd be great. He goes, will you help me tech? And I was like, I guess we can. I said, but I don't want to be your tech man because I know the guys that you're racing with, and I do work for some of these guys. Right. So, and he goes, well, I'll just let everybody know, in advance you're helping me. I'm making decisions. I'm like, okay. So that's how I started. Well, I get to my first race and I'm the same way. I I watch all these races and, so I've got, last year's feature wins. I tallied, I look at all their Facebook, and I get there and, I tell their local announcer, I said, listen, I'm nervous as hell. I announced one race. I announced Circle City the year before. Sure. And that was a whole nother story. But so I get there and I've got everything and, I'm expecting this guy to, be prepared just like you're saying. And, their first division comes out and he's like, not saying a word. And I'm like, the cars are on down there. And, I'm like, what's going on? So, when our cars come out, I've got these note cards, cue cards, and, I'm rambling off their hometowns, their name, how many feature wins they had, what shock package they're on. And that guy goes, what the hell do you want any advice from me for? Right. And then after that, I was like, okay, I can do this. You know what I'm saying?
We took it seriously.
Yeah, but at first I was kind of like, I'm not going to be able to, I don't, calling the race is the easy part, but it's keeping up with the monitor, keeping up with the lap time, keeping up with the guy on the receiver and the scores.
Yeah.
Because
people don't realize what all goes on. I don't
yeah,
know.
that was my biggest thing was I got people chirping on both sides, and I'm just like, wow, like because like I was always like the coach, so I was always in charge, and there's chirping. I'm like, oh my goodness, but that's one thing that I've learned that it's almost easier for me to like when I get there because I've never done like a weekly show. I just come in and I do qualifying, heat races, and B main, A main, and I'm gone. And I'm just like, I would kind of like to have a racetrack where I could just go and polish up on stuff and I've reached out and I've done some events here and there at places, but it's just so tough. And so I have so much respect for what you guys do because I was one of those guys I was like, well, that's easy. Just talk about race cars. I build race cars. I've done this, I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan in the world, but there's not many people that's been to over 300 racetracks. And, so I was like, this is going to be easy. And it's not. It is extremely hard.
The very first time I went into the booth at Lebanon, Missouri, I've said this, I think in my sprint car induction, which I said, I quickly realized there was a lot going on. I had no idea. And then just, I've even, the ability to learn how to fill or how to handle certain situations when they arise. That certainly comes with experience. I will say that the beauty of doing a weekly show, particularly for me now, is, to be honest with you, I can do whatever I want. I can kind of say what I want. Obviously, I'm not trying to take any liberties, but nobody's like, for example, if you go work a NASCAR race, which I've worked NASCAR races and IndyCar races, one of the things that starts to happen is a PR person will call the booth and say, you misread my sponsor. Well, no, you didn't. They're trying to get you to say they're sponsoring again.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of things you learn about how they're trying to do that or how they'll listen to every single word you say. And of course, in some cases, your pre-race is on a script and you're dealing with television and it's a lot more locked down and you have to keep a log of, all the reads. And that at some level, those people don't understand. I mean, a lot of people clamor to get to do that. At some level, that's a job.
Yeah,
that's a flat job, and you're there, and it's long, and it's all that, and it's cool to say you did this event, but in some sense, when you're doing events with people that you know and you like, you know something about them, and you can poke good-natured fun out of them, to me that's just fun. But it is an art. It's an art to sort of balance the demands. I always say that you have to inform, you have to advertise, and you have to entertain, and you have to do all of them. For example, Drake York, little Drake York, he worked a race at Lawrenceburg. He got in the booth at Lawrenceburg, and I was there, and I was going to go do the Silver Crown race at Toledo. We all went to breakfast the next day, and he said, how did I do? And I said, Drake, I happen to know why Johnny Gibson got the World of Outlaws job. I know, because I announced some World of Outlaw races, and I announced one right sort of before he became the announcer. And the issue was Echo Water, which was a main sponsor. I think they sponsored the Dash or something. Yeah. Well, the CEO was there, and he didn't hear Echo Water's name at all. And they lost the money. And so the World of Outlaw guys got Brad and I right off the bat and said, this can't happen. And we said, it won't happen. We understand our jobs. In fact, they talked to us a little bit like, hey, you maybe want to think about doing this. And I never would want to do that kind of schedule. But I told Drake, I said, Drake, you got to advertise. There are sponsors, and it isn't the fun part of the job. Yeah. If those people are paying the bills, they got to hear the name. Right. So you have to do these three things. And to your point, you want even a really good race fan out there who says, wow, I didn't know that. In other words, if you got a tidbit that they didn't know, and they're among the best fans, that's good. And you have to be entertaining. You can't be monotone. And those things are hard. Now, that's where I thought having Brad, we were able to do that. But it is listen, everybody can win at Jeopardy when you're watching home on television because you don't really have to answer before the bell goes off.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you mispronounce a little bit, you still count that as a win.
Yeah, no, that's
not
close enough.
That's not a win. So it's a much harder job than it looks like. It's also, however, what I also tell younger racers is, or not, younger announcers is, they all get flustered when they make a mistake. Okay, you made a mistake, move on.
Yeah, that's
You know, my normal phrase is to a young announcer is, world peace does not hang in the balance here. You're announcing a damn car race. Yeah. That's it. That's all it is.
Well, that's
so calm down.
Right? Well, that's me. Like, you know, at first, like I told my wife, I was like, God, I did terrible, and she was like, the people sitting next to me loved you, and I was like, what? Right. I was like, you know what I'm saying? Because like I thought I was like fumbling over words, but you know, as the show, you know, as I've gone on, like, you know, I had a guy ask me this year, said, how long have you been announcing? Like 10, 15 years? Right. I'm like, this is like race 24.
Right.
You know, the guy's like, what?
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm good by any means, but I pay attention, and I got this from like you and Spanky, and I tell you one person that like Rob Klepper, like Rob. You know, he knew enough about the car. He could tell that, you know, where an issue was. And that's me. Like, you know, I can decipher what's wrong with that car. Right. You know, sprint, midget. Like, I could tell if a torsion arm's bad or if the wheel's bent. Like, you know, so that, you know, that's kind of my niche. I may not be the best play-by-play guy, but if there's an incident, like, and one thing I learned right off the bat, don't place judge on something that happened on the track.
Never.
Because I screwed up one time, and the guy told me that's not what happened. I wrecked myself. I was like, oh, I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah, I told Tony Laporta that early on. Yeah. I said, never assess blame. And my example was, there was a famous racing family in Oklahoma named the Jenningses, and I went to Devil's Bowl Speedway in Texas, and Ernest Jennings was in the race. And late in the race, John Johnson, who was a great race driver from Kansas, family's raced for years, he just appeared to ram Ernest from behind and turn him around. And I'm Ernest's friend. I'm hopping mad. Like, I can't believe he did it. I go down the pits and I said, God, I cannot believe that John Johnson turned you around. He goes, he didn't turn me around. I said, my damn engine stumbled going into turn number 3. John didn't have anywhere to go. Yeah. And from that moment on, I realized, you know, I saw a guy one time wait in the infield at Kokomo, and a guy came by and he drove straight out of the infield and T-boned him in the wall. Now, that one I know was on purpose. Yeah. That one I was pretty clear on. Yeah. And I told Tony that. I said, Tony, you don't know and don't get into that business. There's officials that take care of that. Stay in your lane. Yeah. Just, you know.
Well, one thing about Tony, I was a huge fan of Tony.
I like Tony a lot.
Because he openly admitted, like, hey, I've never really done this stuff, but he reminded, and I messaged him this, and we talked a little bit right after he lost the USAC deal, or however that went down. I don't want to say lost it, but you know, I talked to him and I said, you know, there's this guy that used to announce at the Indianapolis Speedrome called Kevin O'Neill.
Kevin O'Neill.
Yeah, and I said, you remind me a lot of him, and Tony's like, oh, okay, thanks. You know, not blew me off, but I guess he went back and watched some races, and he messaged me back like it was like 2 weeks later. It was like, you really think I'm that good? I'm like, you're pretty damn good. Like, yeah. I like your style.
Brad Dickinson tells a story about the figure 8 cars came to Lincoln Park, and Kevin up there announced, and Kevin just passed away about a year ago or so. And but anyway, Brad said, I'm in the pits and I'm hearing this and I'm thinking this may be the greatest race of all time. So he runs from the pits to go to the grandstand and he says, these 3 cars are out there. They're not 100 yards next to each other. And Kevin's up there acting like it's wheel to wheel. But the thing is, you also, you watch and listen to other people and you develop your own style. You pick and choose. We're all stealers. You steal things, you borrow some things, you take some ideas, and you create your own style, as long as it's not forced. But I forgot the incredibly stupid thing I said at Lincoln Park here last year. It was just the funniest damn thing I said. I don't even know where it came out of my mouth. It was like, you know, I like the wrong race driver. I wasn't even close, and I just started laughing. I'm going, now, where in the world did that come from? And people turn around and look at me and they're laughing. It's like, well, there's no reason getting uptight about it. That's just dumb.
Well, that was really funny. So we went down and we did a race in West Virginia, and and Kurt's with me, and you know, he's never really been on that side of it. And I get up there, and you know, the guy's like, "Oh, you're going to be in the booth next to us," and I was like, oh, "Okay." So I go up there, and it's like an old VIP suite, and there's tables, and it's like. it's almost as big as his kitchen. I'm by myself. And so I call Kurt. I'm like, hey, man, you need to come on up here and just hang out with me for tonight because, I'm doing 4 races. They got 27 divisions. So Kurt gets up there, and I said, this is the guy that didn't run with the tour, and I'll say his name here because his wife was ready to kill me. I said, out next is, Jesse Roop in the 5 car. And she comes up, and we're qualifying. Boom, 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 boom. Beating on the door, and Kurt opens the door, and she comes up. She goes, it's not Roop, it's Rope. And I was like, what? So qualifying was done, and I told her, I said, I'm sorry, ma'am. And it's spelled R-U-P-E, so, I figured, it's Rope. She's screaming at me. I said, did I get Jesse right? she stormed off, man. Well, but again, I'm like, I'm sorry.
But again, here's for example, when that happens, which it will, I mean, particularly if you don't have time. Like I remember I was in Sweet Springs, Missouri, and there was I was doing the micros, and there was a race driver, and I said their name was, I can't remember. I think it was a girl, but I'll just make this up. The last name I'm right. I said, that's Kenny Houston in the car 24. And a really nice woman walked up and said, hey, Pat, that's Houston. She knew my name. She said, that's Houston. I go, oh, great. I said, funny enough, I said, I went to school with a kid. Same deal. He just got tired of trying to tell people how to say his name. He just started going with the right. But I did say, I said, just as we don't always have the time we'd like to walk through, if you got a name that's a little bit different, or it's, it's really wise to sort of just take the time and to make a note to somebody and say, hey, by the way, it's Rope.
That was me. I was like, well, I'm sorry. I'm like, we got 40 freaking cars here. You know what I'm saying? And I found out 10 minutes ago that I was going to be doing all of this because this wasn't originally part of the show. I'm like, I'm sorry. And well, she was hot. And after the races, I seen her and I said, did I get it right? And Kurt tells me, no, you screwed it up again in the race. Oh. And I was like, well, Brad, no, I'm sorry.
Brad, one time, and one of the greatest moments as an announcer I saw out of him was we were at North Vernon, and there was a guy in the stock car division. I don't remember when. But Brad heard the whole conversation. He had bought a Gertie engine when Gerties were the main sprinkler engines. Yeah. He bought a Gertie engine, and he put in this car, which is, return on investment is just dumber than it could be. But Brad at the end said, this guy has really got that Gertie running good. And we see this woman, and she's at the end of the race, and she's running up. She comes up the stairs and goes, where's that damn announcer that's talking about him having a Gertie engine in that car? And Brad goes, man, you just missed him. He's in that red shirt going right out of the gate right there. I would have never been that quick.
That's funny. That's good.
But that's announcing stories, yes.
Well, okay, one last thing before we call it quits, because your wife's probably ready to run us out of the house.
She's doing some work.
She's good. Okay. Yeah. In the 90s, I'm pretty sure it was early 90s because, I got all the racing newspapers and stuff. One thing, the USAC call-in line, you called it?
The Codaphone, we called it.
Yes. Were you the one that was doing that?
No, that was the late Dick Jordan.
Okay, because you got the Dick Jordan Award, correct?
I did.
Okay.
I can tell you a funny story about that, though. That's right. It would start off, thank you for calling USAC.
Yes.
It was the same thing, and then he would say, like, Brady Bacon and the Dynamics Incorporated special. And I used to say, Dick, there hasn't been a special since 1950. Yeah. That's a straight ass DRC, right? But he would say special, and he would go through the results, and it was like 251 USAC or something. Because the bad news is that, again, you try to tell young people that we're all mad when they don't get the race results. That's how we had to get them.
I know that was one. That was one of my main things. I was talking on the because I asked her. I said, "You remember?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh." I was like, "Oh my god!" Like every night, because I remember on TV that USAC would put because it'd be Thursday Night Thunder or whatever Night Thunder it was that week, and they would say next week's races, and I've got the magazines and I'm jotting down, and I'm like, all right, they're on Central Time, so it's gonna be about 1 my time before I can get the answers.
And I used to try to get over my wife barely and get the phone, and I would look at the keypad and I would try to figure out how to dial it right without messing up, waking somebody up, which was like that would be a marriage into saying I woke you up to find out the results of a
Western
States midget race at Tulare.
I was trying to see if Darling competed tonight.
But here's a funny story. I did that line a couple of times.
See, because I remember, that's what I thought. I remember your voice.
One of them I did it at the Springfield Mile. Now I'm gonna back this story up backwards. So Dick Jordan, who's the USAC media chief, it's in the IRL era, and he has to go to Loudon, New Hampshire, to cover the USAC race. So he asked me to be him for these 2 USAC races. I don't work for USAC, but he asked me to do them. I wasn't even going to announce. I was going to be Dick Jordan. So at the Springfield race, because I remember doing the Codaphone that night for sure. I did it 2 nights, but there's a reason I'm holding off on the second. But the second one in Springfield, at the time, it rained. And USAC had a contingency plan for establishing the grid that was the most archaic thing of all time. And it was based on owner and driver points, and you would go back years. So in other words, it's going to rain out. And Raleigh Beal comes in and says, Pat, we're going to have to go to the alternative system. And then he goes, okay, who was the entrant champion in 1993? And I've got a bag full of USAC yearbooks, but I don't have them all. And I'm going, are you kidding me? Yeah. I have to call the great Donald Davidson, this historian of the Speedway, to go to the USAC office, and we're trying to establish the grid. Now, the last time I saw this happen, the great Glenn Nibel was livid at using this procedure because he had assigned the car to Gene Nolan, and Gene Nolan didn't have any points. And so he's underneath the grandstands at the Indiana State Fairgrounds just chewing Dick's rear out. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. I mean, I've got acid reflux before I know what it was like. And I'm just praying that this race just rains out, right?
Yeah.
And it did. It was the answer to all my prayers, right? So it rains out, and I had to call the Codaphone on the way back home to do it. But I had to call it the night before, okay? Yeah. And the night before, we raced at Macon, Illinois.
That's what I remember.
And you know what happened? Yeah. That is the night of the Jack Hewitt incident with the flag.
That's what I was getting at, because that's what I was asking, because I was like, I'm pretty sure, because I was thinking, I was like, man, I don't know, Pat. Like, how in the world is he doing all this stuff? But I remember that because I called, and then because I didn't see the race, because the race was on TV. It wasn't on TV. Do got the. Yeah, got the video. He got to hit the video. But so I call, and I get the results, and then the video's going. I don't remember how I even seen the video, but the video's going around, and I see it, and I'm thinking, oh my God! Like, if this was live on ESPN, USAC would be off the charts right now, or off the air.
Well, and during that race, of course, we're at Macon, and beyond the Jack Hewitt incident. Kenny Irwin Jr. had taken Tony Elliott out at some point, but Tony gathered it up, and Sandy Griffith, the longtime USAC scorer, is next to me. Sandy's great, and I see Tony Elliott's got his car going again, and he's going down the back straightaway, and I can see exactly where he's headed, and I just go, uh-oh, this isn't going to be pretty.
Yeah.
And he just broad slides Kenny Irwin into the fence, right? Just kabloom. And then this whole thing unfolds with Jack. And what happened was late Billy Shipman, we just lost, flagged from the infield. He's in the infield. He's looking this way. And so a car dies on the back straightaway. So when Billy goes to get the yellow flag, which I don't even know if Jack could have seen it, but he dropped it. He dropped the yellow flag. And I don't know if he got to the light, but these cars split, right? And then Jack comes and creams this guy. And then Jack sort of pinwheels into the infield and lands almost next to the flag stand.
Yeah, he's like right there at the
flag stand. And so I see him get out, and I think he's going to pummel this poor guy who's just an innocent victim. I mean, his car died. It wasn't his fault. And I'm thinking, oh, Jack, don't do that. But Jack's going after Billy Shipman, right? I mean, so he's really going to kill Billy Shipman. And you've heard the story. You've heard the clip. But the best part of that whole thing was Bill Carey was the chief steward. And Bill Carey still is involved in racing. He does some of the pavement midget stuff at RP. But he was the chief steward. And he was a parochial school physical education teacher. And he's a pretty big guy, and he's got a gravelly voice. He's a smoker. He's got a gravelly voice like that. Yeah. And he's trying to get Jack to calm down, which is near high impossible, right? It's near high impossible, right? And Jack is just going to kill Billy Shipman. And so Bill Carey, and I still think is one of the greatest moments of officiating ever, finally is just ready to give up. So he looks at Jack and says, okay, Jack. He says, okay, big boy. Now let's remember in this period of time, Jack Hewitt and Silver Crown cars. I mean, he was spectacular in Silver Crown cars. So Bill Carey is just going, okay, Jack. Okay. He says, I'll tell you what. He says, you go in there, big boy, and you get the biggest hunk of his ass you can. I mean, you just go in there and get the biggest hunk of his ass can. But when we go to Springfield tomorrow for a high-paying race, you won't be there. And that's when Jack threw out the anchor.
Yeah, he's like, I'm done.
Like, now you're talking sense to me. And so, but that was the night I did the Codaphone. So I had that and a rain out where I think I'm going to get killed by the competitors, and that's the last time I wanted to do that job.
All right, Bloomington and Lincoln Park Speedway, please do me a favor. Let's get a voicemail so Pat can, every week he can give her story, because I'll call it. I will call it even if I'm there, I'm going to call it on the way home.
Well, it was just great stuff. You know, Jack, we went down to Memphis in, I think, 97. We're going to run the pavement there. It's an early race, and it's a complete mess. There's rain. We're going to run it with ARCA. It's a disaster. And Jim McKillian, who ran the Long Beach Grand Prix, and I don't know if they had Gateway then or not, but he's involved in this racetrack. And I see him over there digging holes, and it's pouring. And George Snyder said this place will be ready for a race next year, and he was probably right. And it's just raining to beat the devil. And all of a sudden, I'm standing next to USAC President John Caples. Him and Ron Drager go out from Yorka, and they drive around the racetrack. Jimmy Sills walks by, and he says, what are they doing? You can surf out there, right? I go, Jimmy, I don't know. So then I hear John Caples calling Jason Smith, who's now the president of USAC, saying, Mr. Smith, tell the competitors that the track is open for business. I'm looking out there going, what? And so you hear this crack, and I hear Mr. Cable saying, Mr. Smith, are you telling me we have no participants prepared to practice? And Jason says, that's right. We've got no participants ready to practice, which of course they didn't. It was just ridiculous. Okay, now where does Jack fit in all this? So the next day I see Jack standing by the racetrack, and I got a wireless mic, and I said, so Jack, I said, can we do an interview here? And he goes, are you working for the track? Is it for you? Who's it for? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm working for the racetrack. And he goes, nothing against you, but no. Yeah. And I said, okay. And he goes, I'll tell you why. He said, you kept me here. These guys kept me here all day yesterday. I missed 2 perfectly good races in Ohio. And besides that, when we were out here schooling around, I missed both of my favorite fishing shows. So he wasn't going to talk to me.
You see, you should have worked for yourself that day.
Yes, but it was just great. But it's been fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. Like I said, I'm new to the announcing and to the podcast and to the interview.
Yeah. Well, good luck editing this.
We probably won't edit.
I'm not going to edit much of this. That's the way I am. I'm just
good.
What you see is what you get. I tell people all the time. I got big shoulders. I kind of made a statement about not a racetrack, but a situation that happened at the racetrack, and I said, I don't disrespect the racetrack or anything, but I got big shoulders. You're not going to make me mad. I've had moms call me that their kids didn't play, so whatever you say is not going to hurt my feelings.
Exactly. I've been there.
But thank you. From the bottom of my heart, for doing this, and
I appreciate it.
great.
It's
Anytime.
it's fun.
It's an honor for us.
Yeah, and don't tell me anytime because we'll do it again. So
I like it. It's fun.
But yeah, I really appreciate it. And there's a part of me that the reason why we started doing this because we have so many stories going up and down the road, but we just want to keep racing alive, like bring the younger generation in. But not only that, like, tell the old stories because
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that now everything can be documented. Everything can go on YouTube. So like, let's make sure we preserve this because everybody's not going to be around to not just to tell the stories, but just to keep it alive because there's so much stuff that I look at things and we start talking and we're like, it's funny, we were at Clarksville, Tennessee, and like this is why this is funny because we were there for, it was a show, it was 15 years ago, and still today, they had a click it or ticket, booze it or lose it ad, and they played it like every 30 seconds, and it seemed like we was there for 10 hours, and so like every time like it's downtime, and I look at Kurt like, if you booze it, you lose, just stuff like that, like you don't. It's just so many just little things and relationships and memories and. Like I said, I've always been a fan of yours, and I really appreciate you doing this for us.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
And, next time I'm at Bloomington, I'm going to come up there and poke you in the ribs. And
do that.
Yeah, I'm going to say, hey, let me call this Hornet Heat race, just so I can call one race here at Bloomington. So,
that's a deal. That's a deal.
But yeah, really, really appreciate it. And, guys, I don't want to tell everybody our secrets, but if you just reach out to Pat, he'll do whatever you ask. All right. So if there's anybody out there that wants a million miles of racing stories, he's covered a lot of blacktop up and down the road in the Midwest, South, out West. Just reach out to him. Don't tell him I sent you because I think we're going to become pretty good friends. So I don't want to piss him off, but guys, please reach out, not just to Pat, but just to everybody. If you've got someone that you admire, they say don't meet your heroes. Yeah. I say screw that. There's two guys that I've had relationships with that we talk about stuff, and this was a pleasure. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, that was fun.
All right, guys, that was Pat Sullivan, and Flash. What a fascinating individual Pat Sullivan is.
Yep.
By far, one of my favorite interviews. I said it in the interview, and they always say, "Don't ever meet your heroes."
Yeah.
And I call BS on that because Spanky to Spain was one of the first guys that I associated late model racing with.
Right.
The same way with James Essex. He's one of the guys that that we grew up listening to, going to Brownstown, and the same way with Pat Sullivan. Pat Sullivan is Mr. Indiana in my opinion.
Yep, he's forgot more about racing than we'll ever learn probably.
Yeah, I mean, and the crazy thing is, like, I'm gonna let you guys on a little inside baseball here. When Flash and I go and do interviews, I don't write down anything. I might write down like 2 or 3 things that I make sure I want to talk about. Well, we had like 5 things wrote down for Pat Sullivan because there's stuff that we wanted to, make sure we covered. And like in the first question, he answered all 5 of them.
He answered most of them. So.
And I was like, okay.
So then we got a blank piece of paper to look at.
Yeah. So, but Pat Sullivan, thank you again for doing the interview. Like I said.
Oh yeah, we appreciate it.
We really appreciate it. He opened, with open arms. We got up there to his place, and his wife tried to feed us dinner, and I mean, just super, super nice guy. I mean, for a guy that's done everything in the motorsports world, he's in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. He was the PA announcer for the IndyCar Series, the PA announcer for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah,
he's worked for ESPN. He's worked for Flow. We're just a couple of guys that grew up racing, at the Sportsdrome and learned how to work on stuff ourselves, and he could have said, guys, nah, I'd really rather not.
Yeah.
And not only did he not do that,
he treated us like gold.
Yeah, he treated us like we were one of his kids.
Yeah.
And he's waiting on us at the front porch because I told him we'd be there at 7:30, and I never messaged him back. I talked to him at 2:00, so I'll probably be there about 7:30.
Yeah.
And we never talked again. And as I rolled up, it was about 7:30. He's on the front porch waiting on us.
Yeah, waving at us.
So, that was a really really good interview, and like I said, it was really special to me.
It was a fun time too, going up and doing that. So
yeah, and the best thing was, like, we talked about so much, but there was so much stuff that I wanted to ask him about the Michael Schumacher story, and all. I mean, there was so much stuff that we still could have talked about, and we just So he said anytime. So I'm gonna take him up on that. We're gonna have a part 2 and part 3, and actually he may even do some call in stuff with us. But big thank you. Can't say thanks enough, and not to just Pat, but everybody that's doing the interviews.
Oh yeah, we haven't had a bad interview yet. They've all been great. I think every one of them.
Well, and like
especially for us not knowing what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never interviewed nobody in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, usually I was the one getting interviewed,
right?
Either at the racetrack or at the basketball games or by the Board of Education.
Yeah.
We
try to do all sit downs too. We're trying not to do over the phone if we don't have to. So,
yeah. It's a lot of traveling, but it's worth it. Like stories like Pat Sullivan, and
everybody's had stories we've been to so far. So.
And like Mike Gibson, I mean, big thank you to Mike Gibson again. He didn't have to open up to us about what he did, and and he did, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, like I said, the USAC stuff's coming up this week on Flow. Everybody check it out. I think there's some races around hit or miss, but like I said, this show has gone on long enough, so we're not gonna keep it not gonna keep it going all night. But next week we got another really really good interview.
Oh yeah.
We just went up and did it this week. We're not going to tell you who it is, but next week's interview is really good as well. If you're a sprint car racer, if you're a young kid that's listening to this because you see Pat Sullivan's name on it, and you race sprint cars, midgets, micro sprints, I promise you want to listen to next week's interview. Because there's a lot of stuff that this guy lets us know that if you're paying attention, you're going to get a lot faster and become a better race car driver.
Right.
He opened up his shop and hell, damn near opened up his notebook right in the interviews. But we got some big things coming up. Like I said, there's plenty of events going on in the winter, and we're going to be here throughout the year. So we've got a lot of. I don't really want to tell everybody exactly what's going on. I want you to be surprised, but there's a lot of late model and modified and sprint car stuff to come.
Oh yeah.
So like I said, it's a lot of work, but it's fun, and that's why we're doing it. So until next time, we'll be trading sliders.